Welcome to WordPress security. This is an incredibly hot topic and for a very good reason, something that you need to pay very close attention to. First, let me dispel a myth. Some will say that the use of the WordPress software is risky because it isn't all that secure. That's simply not true. The fact is that WordPress is very well coded and there's a large support team that works tirelessly to close security issues, bugs, etc. as they are found. Before we dig in, though, I do need to give you a few disclaimers, and here's number one. Before doing anything else, back up. And as far as backups are concerned, we would consider or recommend that you do a full backup, meaning that you back up everything, not just the database, but everything. Your WordPress software, all of your uploaded files, your themes, your plugins, etc., and in addition to that, the database. This can be done through a variety of ways. Our absolute favorite is through the use of the Backup Buddy plugin, which is a premium plugin available from pluginbuddy.com. Disclaimer number two, if you're doing the work for someone other than yourself, ensure that you have all the details you will need to contact the host's support department and to make sure that they will do the work for you or on your behalf. Exactly what they will require is dependent upon the host, so just make sure that you contact them ahead of time, find out what information they require of you to basically work and to do work for you on the client's behalf, and then make sure that you do the work at a time when their support is available. Disclaimer number three, as each server setup is unique, you may or may not have access to everything shown during this training. We are going to show you a specific and particular setup on a HostGator reseller account, but your server setup may be different than what we show. So just make sure that you check in on everything prior to doing any work. And again, make sure to have full backups ahead of time. Disclaimer number four, despite what anyone tells you, it is impossible to create a hack-proof site. By following our training, the end result will be much more secure than the average WordPress installation, but it will not be hack-proof. Even banks and the Pentagon have been hacked in the past. Some basic security issues. You need to know that you yourself can infect your own server. About 30% of all machines right now, at least as far as PC platforms are concerned, are infected with some form of virus and or malware, including a keylogger type of malware that can send username and password data directly to the individual that installed that malware. If you're using easily guessed and or cracked passwords, you definitely increase your risk. So any of your passwords and usernames with cPanel, FTP, MySQL for databases, WordPress, etc., all of those need to be extremely secure. In other words, you can't guess them, and it's hard to crack them because they are not dictionary terms and they are longer than average. Another issue is using standard FTP or using a non-HTTPS login also increases your risk. So anytime that you have the ability to log into your server, whether that's using FTP or logging into your cPanel or even logging into WordPress, if you can log in through a secured means by which the data is encrypted during either the upload process as part of FTP or the login process through cPanel or WordPress, etc., it's always best to use the secure protocol. Quick WordPress security overview. Ensure that the machine that you're using to connect to your site and or server is free of viruses and or malware. Mentioned that just prior. So just make sure that you get your machine clean prior to FTP, prior to connecting to cPanel, prior to connecting to WordPress. So again, just a repeat, connect via secure connections whenever possible. This becomes even more important if you're using a public Wi-Fi service as available maybe by a restaurant or coffee shop, etc. Install WordPress manually and using best practices. We will show you that during this webinar. install WordPress manually and using best practices. We will show you that during the session. Make sure to harden your server. Check your PHP settings, your file permissions, etc., and we're going to cover those things. Continuing on, harden your WordPress installation. That'll be covered in this training session. Perform routine backups and remove the backups from your server. It's, of course, great to have backups, but you don't want them on the same server that's running WordPress, just sitting there, because if someone is capable of getting into WordPress, they can infect those as well. Run periodic scans of your installation to ensure that it is free of malware. We'll show you how to do that. And consider using a service like Securi, which is at security.net, SUCURI.net, to provide you even more peace of mind. Basically, they have the ability to routinely scan your installations and even clean your installations if someone is capable of dropping malware on your site. All right, ready? Let's get to it. All right, so first step obviously is, if this is a brand new installation of WordPress and we're going to start the training from that direction, the first thing we need to do is install WordPress. If you're hardening or improving the security of an existing WordPress installation, most of this process is exactly the same. Of course, you can skip the installation part because that part is already done. But there will be a couple of differences, and we'll mention those later on as we go through the training. So again, if this is a brand new installation, the first thing to do is to install WordPress. And again, like we said just a minute ago, our strong suggestion is that you do this process completely manually, and you'll see why, and I'll mention why as we go through it. You only want to get WordPress from wordpress.org itself. The actual location URL is wordpress.org/download, as you see highlighted here in the browser bar. So wordpress.org/download is the one and only location that you should get WordPress software from. Do not get it from any other location, because someone could have already injected malicious code into it, and simply installing WordPress from that particular package, you could have an infected and compromised site right from the get-go. So if you want to download WordPress, once you get to the site, you'll see the blue button that says download WordPress. This will download WordPress to your local machine in a zip format, .zip. If you prefer the .tar.gz compressed version, you can click on the link. So click on whichever is appropriate for you and download it to your machine. One other quick note, you'll see under release notification that WordPress has a mailing list that you can sign up for, such that anytime they release a new stable release of WordPress, they will email you. So this is something that you might want to enter your email address and join, such that you get routine updates from WordPress whenever a new stable release of WordPress is available. So I've already downloaded WordPress to speed this process up. So I'm just going to open, actually I'm going to go to a blank tab so we can kind of clean this up just a second. And we're going to open up a folder. You'll see here that I've downloaded the WordPress 3.3.2 zip file, which is the latest stable release as I make this training. And after it's been unzipped, it simply creates a folder or directory named WordPress. If I double click this, you'll see that all of the WordPress files are inside of it. So that's the first step. Download WordPress and unzip it. We're going to actually upload this via FTP, or more specifically SFTP. That's the first process. So before we do anything else, I recommend that you create a new folder for this particular installation, so we can keep the installation details nice and tidy inside of here. So I'm going to just simply click New Folder, or you can right-click and choose New Folder, and I'm just going to put, I don't know, Live Demo Details. Whatever makes sense for your installation. You might want to use your domain, .com, etc., just make sure that you keep a folder that's nice and tidy for your installation. I'm going to move WordPress, all the files into that, so we can just continue to work in here. And I'm also going to open up a blank notepad, and I'm going to put just some information that gives me an idea as to what we're about to do. The very first step is to create a MySQL database. So we're going to need some information. We're going to need the database name, which is just DB short for database. We're going to need the database username. We're going to need the database password. That's the first 3 bits of information. Then we're also going to need the WordPress login information for the user and the password that we are going to create through this process. So I'm going to start basically each one of my installations the same way with a text file similar to this, such that I can log the database name, the database username, the database password, and then also the WordPress login user and password for the admin account that we're going to create. Do a file save as, make sure that we put it, I think not where I want to be. Give the file an appropriate name and save it. So with that, I can close this and we can go ahead and start the process. The first process is to log into your control panel for your website. So over here, let's see where I put it. We are working right now at live training URL, the number 2.info. You can see that currently there are no files on the server whatsoever. And I've tried to open up the WordPress login page, which you can see is showing a 404 error page because, again, the site files do not yet exist. So typically, if you were to log into your cPanel, if you're using cPanel, the actual cPanel control panel, you would typically put in your domain dot extension, in this case it's a .info, /cPanel, and that would allow you to log in via regular HTTP. What you may not know is that typically there's other things, and I'm not going to get into the specifics of what they are, but things that are called ports. And the port for normal cPanel is :2082. So if I were to put :2082, it would log me into cPanel normally. Now, you're going to have to check with your host to see if they allow secure cPanel logins, and if they do, how you need to connect. But for me, on this particular HostGator reseller account, I can simply just change the 2 to a 3. So after the domain name dot extension, I simply put :2083 and I hit enter. And it's going to redirect to a new kind of a URL that looks weird, but you'll notice up here in the browser path it's HTTPS now. And if I put my information in, which I will do right now, let's see, we are here. Oh, this is from our other installation that we did. Let's see, here we go. I'll go ahead and just log in and expose the details to y'all, because by the time you see this later, it will have been changed. This is just a training location. But we are now logged into our cPanel, and we have logged in again via HTTPS. So this is the first best practice, is to log into your control panel, if at all possible, with an HTTPS URL. We need to create a MySQL database. Again, your setup may be different if your host, your hosting account does not use cPanel. If that's the case, you'll just need to contact your host and make sure that you find their training information. They likely have training information that shows you how to create a MySQL database. So under databases, for me, I have two options, MySQL databases and the wizard. Since we're only creating one new database, I'll use the wizard because it's just the easiest way to teach this. You can also use the other MySQL databases option. This option gives you the ability to create databases, to manage databases, etc. The wizard is simply for creation of a singular database. So I'm going to click MySQL Database Wizard. We're going to give the database a name. Anytime that you're creating database names, usernames, passwords, again, remember that you want to create unguessable, secure passwords. So since there's not a password generator on this page, what I'm going to use and recommend, there's multiple options for you online, but one quality site is found at random.org. You see that here in big text, and it's /passwords. Or if you go to random.org and you hover over lists and more, you can select passwords and you'll come to the same page. This is a random password generator. We can generate as many passwords as we want, up to 100 at a time. You can tell it how long at minimum, or how long basically each password should be. You see a minimum of 6, maximum 24. I'm going to change this and increase this to 12. It's not a magical number. You can use 12, 13, 15. It really doesn't matter. And you'll see how this works. And I don't know, maybe I'll up this to 10 just to make sure that we find ones that we like. So it's going to generate 10 random passwords. Each will be 12 characters long, and I simply click the Get Passwords button and it'll do its magic. And here we go, 10 random passwords. We prefer passwords that start with an alpha numeric rather than a number or some type of a strange character. One thing that you'll find at random.org is that you won't find any strange characters. You won't find percentage signs, periods, exclamation points, etc. If you want to use those, you'll have to add them to your password string, and we would recommend that you actually do that. But anytime I look at these, I'm automatically going to I'm going to drop out anything that starts with a number, and I think looking quickly that's the only one out of this list that does. So firstly, I'm going to grab this string right here. I'm going to copy that one, and we're going to use that as the database name. You'll see that we get a green success check mark, so everything is fine. It's totally happy with this particular database name. One thing to point out is that you will see this bit of text and an underscore preceding this field box, this text box. And the reason that is, and your system, your setup may be different depending upon what type of a platform you're on, but for cPanel hosts, the database names will be preceded by your actual cPanel username. So this is the cPanel username for this account, which is right here, and then it's separated between the cPanel username and the new database name that I've just chosen by this underscore. So just remember that when you see database names, they have the cPanel username, an underscore, and then the actual database name. We need the entire string for WordPress installation, even though we are only actually creating this second part. I'll click Next Step, and you'll see that it's added the database and in its entirety. One thing to note, if you try to copy it right out of here, and it's okay to do so, but be careful. It's added a period right here at the very end, and it's probably hard for you to see, but I've highlighted it here as if it's like the end of a sentence. We did not include this period, and if you try to include this entire string when you install WordPress, it will fail simply because of that one period. It's not the actual database name. So I don't recommend that you copy it from this page, but if you do, just remember, do not copy the final period, or just make sure that you only copy the portion that includes the database name that you've created. Step 2, as you can see, is to create a username, basically a new user that can access this database. There's a quick note that says 7 characters maximum. So what I'm going to do is go back to random.org. I'm going to just look at the passwords again. Maybe I'll take this one and I'll just kind of count it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to copy that portion. come back to cPanel, and we will use this for the actual database username. Again, you'll see that I got a green check mark for success. If I put in a number that was longer, unless I messed that up, yeah, it should be 8. It should have actually given me, interestingly enough, it should have given me a red mark, but it didn't. You may see that it gives you a red X if you try to paste too many characters in there. Anyway, 7 is the max. So this is our database username. Now we need to create a password. There is actually a password generator inside of here that you can use for the password for that database user. So if you'd like to use it, you can just simply click the box here and use it, or of course you can go right back over to random.org. For this, I'm just going to go ahead and use the password generator, and we'll see that it creates a funky string. I typically said I don't like numbers or funky symbols. I guess I didn't say funky symbols. We don't like numbers or funky symbols at the beginning or end of a string, so I wouldn't suggest using this in its entirety. You can either copy it out and change it, or you can use one from random.org. I'll just go ahead and copy this. We'll put it back in the new details, temporarily at least. I'm going to remove the 3. I don't know, I'll make it maybe something else, and maybe I'll put a percentage sign in here. This will be quite secure. Again, I just don't want it to start with a numerical value, and I don't want it to start with a funky character like it had initially, the underscore, and I don't want it to end that way. If I have anything funky, I want it like in the middle somewhere of other text. So we'll copy this out, making sure that we copy it basically and nothing more, and we'll use this as the password. I'm going to just Control-V to paste it in twice. You'll see that it says that our password is very strong. We got 100 out of 100 scale, which is good. And I click Create User. So now we have created the database, we've created a user, we've created a password for that user. Before I click and assign privileges to this, though, here's what I want to do. You'll see that right here, it's giving me the ability to copy the user, the database, and even the password. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to retrieve that information from this page before doing anything else. The database right here, the second bit, is the database name, and I want that information first. So I'm going to highlight that, being very careful to get it and nothing else, and I will paste that right here for our database name. I'll save my file. Nextly, I want the database username, which is this bit of text. Being careful again to copy it. We now have the database user information. And lastly, we're going to get the database password information, and that is from up here. However, like before, you have to be careful because there's quotation marks wrapped around this thing, and that is not part of our password for the database user. So you got to be really careful during the copy process and the paste process. Just take a peek at it. If I had accidentally, copied the quotation marks, I could obviously get rid of them at this stage, but you just want to, go slow and make sure that you've done everything properly. So one quick thing I'll point out, because it comes up quite a bit and adds confusion, is the database name you'll see is preceded by the cPanel username and the underscore. Same with the database username. The only value of the 3 that this is not the case for is the password. The password is just the raw data that we entered and nothing more. So just if you're confused about that, know that that's specifically the way that it's supposed to be. Just the database name and database username will have the cPanel username and the underscore preceding the values that you actually used. So with that, the next step is to give privileges basically to this user. The user, this database user, has to have some type of privileges. Basically, you're telling your server what this user can or cannot do as it tries to access the database. Some training modules or some training out there basically will tell you to only select a small amount of these options, because actually in truth the WordPress or the database user rather doesn't need all privileges as it tries to access the database, and it can be more secure to simply select the individual items that is at minimum. We don't recommend that, and that's only for one reason. Pretty much in everything that you do in security or just to your website in general, there's always a pro and a con, and we want you just to understand the entire scope of this, not just think security and be narrow-minded, because what's going to happen is in the future for this installation, it's likely that you're going to install some amount of plugins. You're going to install, possibly new and varied themes of which we have no knowledge of what you're going to install. Maybe the same thing for widgets, etc. It's very frequent that a plugin, sometimes themes, sometimes widgets, actually need database access, and they may require different privileges than you have set up if you set it up really stringently. So in order to avoid future potential conflicts with your installation, our recommendation is to use all privileges. Simply just tick this top box. Doing so, again, is slightly less secure than being ultra specific in regards to what the database user can do, but you're going to run into less potential conflicts and trouble in the future if you select all privileges. And quite honestly, the difference between these two options in terms of security is really not that big of a deal. So it's not like you're completely throwing everything out for a little bit of user experience. It's really not going to make that big of a difference, but it certainly can make a very big difference in terms to whether or not you're able to work with your WordPress site in the future without having to run into lots of headaches. So assign all privileges to this particular user, click Next Step, and basically we've completed the process. We've completed or created a database user, a database password, and that part is entirely done. The next step is to go back to our site, just the actual domain name itself. Actually, that's not true. We need to upload WordPress. Let me slow down and make sure that I do this in its correct order. We need to log into our server via FTP and upload the WordPress files before doing anything else. So I'm using FileZilla during this training. It's a free piece of software, a free FTP client. Hopefully you're familiar with it. If not, just do a quick Google search on FileZilla and you'll find it. Again, though, make sure that you only get it from the actual website. So I should point that out real quick. It is at FileZilla-project.org. FileZilla-project.org is the correct and real website for this particular piece of software. I would not recommend that you get it from anywhere else. Once here, you simply click the button for downloading the client. It's going to load a new page, hopefully in just a second. And once here, you can find the version of FileZilla that's right for you. If you're running a Windows machine, you'll want probably to download right here from this big green button. If you're running Linux, you'll look at these. If you're running Mac, you'll look at these. The difference is which type of processor you're running. So pick whichever one of these is correct for you and download it and install it on your machine in order to use the FileZilla FTP client, which I'll bring up now again. You'll need some information from your host in order to connect. You'll need your FTP host name, your FTP username, your FTP password. And if you're going to connect via SFTP, Secure File Transfer Protocol, you may also need to know what port the host requires. The default port is number 21. The default port for SFTP is 22, but those will not always be correct, as you'll see here in just a second. I'm going to click this button on the far left called the Site Manager. It's going to open and show me my available logins. Basically, for this one, we're going to log into livetrainingurl2.info, which you can see is here in my host name. Currently, it is set to FTP. This is the standard non-secure version. If I want to click this drop down, I can select SFTP. So now it's using the secure protocol. The login type should be normal. You'll put in your FTP username, your FTP password, and the additional thing that you have to do is include the port number. Like I said, FileZilla will tell you that the default port number is 22, and that's true. For this particular hosting account, I can tell you that it's actually 2222. And once this information is here, I'm going to click, I can click connect and it'll automatically connect me, so I might as well do that. It'll save it at the same time as I'm going to connect. Since this is the first time I'm connecting to this demo URL, I'm probably going to get a warning about the host key, and we'll see that here in just a second. So I'm going to do my best to connect via SFTP, and we do get the warning that says that this particular host key is not known. So you have to make sure that you are in fact, logging into the right place. If you do trust, your settings to make sure that you know where you're going, you can tick the button to always trust the host, or you can simply just click OK and trust it. For this time, it's entirely up to you. Right now we are connected to the host via Secure File Transfer Protocol. You'll notice that if you look up here in the path, it says SFTP:// the full FTP login information, and you see that it says :2222. Again, this is the port number that we logged into to get in via SFTP. So any information that I now send from my machine to my server, that information is encrypted as it goes, so it can't be easily sniffed out by someone who's trying to basically surf Wi-Fi's, etc., which makes it more secure than just using the standard normal FTP process. I'm going to double-click public_HTML, the folder left of it, as this is my root directory. I want to install WordPress in the root directory. I'm going to firstly get rid of this error log. It must have come up during some of my testing earlier today. You can see that we have a clean installation. There's basically, again, no files currently here inside of the root directory. Of course, you don't always have to install WordPress in the root directory. You may have, maybe a static HTML website in here, and you may want to put it in a directory named blog or something. All you do is simply just create the directory first and install WordPress at that location. That will work just fine, as will installing it into a subdomain. Either one of those, you just simply need to just create either the subdomain or the directory ahead of time and then just install your WordPress files into it. For this training, we're going to install WordPress just into the root directory, which again for this hosting account is public_HTML, which will basically make the home page available at the actual top-level domain, livetrainingurl2.info. So the next thing I need to do is I need to navigate to where my WordPress files are that I downloaded from wordpress.org and upload them to the server. So you navigate your local machine on the left-hand side. Your right-hand side is your server, where you're actually going to push the files to. So I'm going to come up here and see where I'm at. I want to be in session 5. We have live demo details here. This is where we just move the WordPress files to. I'll double click and open WordPress, and these are all of the folders and files that we're going to move to our WordPress installation. I'm going to left click on the top folder, which in this case is named wp-admin. I'm going to use the scroll bar to scroll to the very bottom. I'm going to hold down my shift key. Since you can't see that, I'm holding down my shift key and I'm going to left click on the very last file inside of the WordPress folder. And you can see now that it has selected each file and or folder inside of the main WordPress directory. Please note that you do not want to upload WordPress inside of the WordPress folder. You simply want to upload the folders and files raw, like I'm showing you here. Once you've selected them all through that process, you can right-click, choose Upload, and it'll start basically uploading the files from your machine over to your server. This is probably the most lengthy bit of the process. You can see that right down here under this tab, it started off with a little more than 900 files that it needs to move from my machine over to my server. Of course, how fast or how long this process is going to take is going to be dependent upon your particular internet connection. So times will vary. Typically, it's maybe a 3 to 5 minute process. It can be longer, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, depending again on your connection speed. So with that, let me take a look at my notes and make sure that I'm on track. I think we're doing good. Yes.
People have brought up that there's other ways to do this install. One of them is, if you really feel comfortable with it, you can do it through cPanel by uploading the WordPress zip file and then decompressing it. The problem is it sometimes gets out of hand and splatters the files all over the place. So typically FTP gives you more control, and you see exactly what's going on, you know what's going on. You're not just unzipping the file on the server. But there are different ways to do this upload. For WordPress security, it's always a good idea to know how to FTP, to manipulate the files and know where everything is.
Yep, certainly. There are many different ways to install WordPress, including the semi-automated installers that we mentioned at the beginning of this training. Initially some people might say, well, why don't you just use Fantastico Deluxe or Simple Scripts or Scriptoculous? It seems a whole lot easier to do it that way, and it may be. I've done this so many times I don't find it hard, but it may be easier for you to do it that way. But easier, of course, does not always mean better. And in the case of installing WordPress, I can assure you that the very best way to install WordPress is manually. We are going to have some opportunity to control certain values as we create this installation that you'll see here in just a minute that you can't control when using an automated installer. And the end result of your installation is you start with a foundation that is less secure than it should be, and that really just doesn't make any sense. You always want to start with a really strong foundation and work from there. It is possible to undo that which is done automated or automatically by an automated installer, but it's a very big pain. It's not a simple, easy process, and as a result of that, it's always best to start with a strong foundation and just work from there. And it really isn't difficult, and it doesn't take much time, to be honest. So
I noticed there's a failed transfer.
Yeah.
Someone asked, is there a downside to using SFTP? And it does take it's a little bit slower because it's got a little bit more overhead, and it sometimes does time out, which we might see as we're working with the files. But you're dealing with security, and this is not something that's going to be happening all the time while you're using the site. This is just during the upload process. So I recommend whenever possible to use SFTP, or Secure File Transfer Protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're almost done. Jerry pointed out that there's one that's noted as failed. We'll take a quick peek at it to see what it says. Okay, this was from a previous attempt. This is not from this attempt. You can see that it's calling out backup buddy, repair buddy, etc. This has nothing to do with what we've just done. This has to do with something I was doing earlier today to prepare for today's training. So we are good in terms of what we have successfully transferred. The same thing, if you look over here at successful transfers, we did not just transfer 2,216 files. This has to do with stuff that was done previously. I think in total, WordPress is made up of just right around 900, 950 type files. I didn't see the exact value when we started, but it's nowhere near 2,200. Okay, so we have an installation of WordPress on the server. We've created a MySQL database and all of the necessary information, the username, the passwords, etc., to be able to connect to it. And that's basically the framework that we need to start our WordPress installation. We will come back and work on the server via FTP because there's some things that we're going to want to change and harden and improve as we go along. But one thing I want to point out at this point is this file right here. In order for WordPress to run, it needs a file named wp-config.php. You'll notice that this file is named wp-config-sample.php. Like we just mentioned, there are multiple ways to install WordPress, even multiple ways to install it manually. We're going to show you kind of a hybrid way where you're kind of using an online guided approach, if you will, to install WordPress, where you don't really have to get in and mess around with the WP config file all that much. We will get into it in a little bit, but just note that right now there's this wp-config-sample.php, and this one will not actually allow WordPress to run. We need the other one, and this process, the process that we're going to show you right now, the guided process, is going to help us create this new file. So just make note of that. So the next part of the step, again, just a real quick repeat. Step 1, log into your cPanel, hopefully through HTTPS, create a MySQL database, a user and a password, and then assign all privileges to that new user. That's step 1. Step 2, log into your server via FTP, hopefully SFTP, and upload all of the WordPress files into the directory, whether that's the root or in a subdirectory, etc., that you want WordPress to go into. We've done both of those things. Here is step number 3. Step number 3 is to basically go to your site, and I'm going to see if I can find a link to open up so I can leave cPanel open. I'm going to go to the actual main domain, live training URL number 2.info. I'm going to just try to access basically the home page, and in doing so, as soon as I hit enter, we're going to get basically this page that's delivered to us via WordPress, and it simply just says that it can't find the wp-config file. I just showed you that it's not there, and it's going to give us the ability to create one. So click the Create a Configuration File button. It's going to tell us what information we need: the database name, the database username, the database password, a database host, we'll talk about that in a minute, and the table prefix, which is more specifically the database table prefix. We'll talk about that more in a second too. It says, it's re-mentioning the fact that there's WP config sample, and that you can simply open it in a text editor and do the same work that we're doing here. You can do it inside of that file, rename it to wp-config.php if you prefer to do it that way, upload it, and you can basically bypass this guided process. But for now, all we have to do is click Let's Go. you'll see that now we have the ability to populate those fields. It's asking for the database name. Simply just bring up our text file and we copy the first value, and I have done this so many times that I've shown you basically to put it in the order that I knew WordPress was going to ask for it. It's going to ask for database user. I'm simply just highlighting and Control-C to copy it to my clipboard, and then Control-V to paste. The database password, again, this is the value that does not have the cPanel username in front of it. Now, these other two we didn't create during that process. It's asking for a database host or host name. Here's what you need to know. It is possible for you to run a database, a MySQL database, entirely on a different server. You can actually use a database that's hosted somewhere else and use it for WordPress. Localhost is basically an indication that you are using a database that is on or resides on the same server as your WordPress installation. 99 times out of 100, you will not need to change this value. It will be localhost. If you try to go through this process and you get an information or piece of information that says it cannot connect to the database, then I want you to do a few things. First, revisit and pay very close attention to the values that you've included for the database name, the username, and password. Make sure that those are correct. If you are certain that there's, not an extra, maybe a space at the beginning, maybe you've forgotten and you actually got that period, you can't even see that on the screen, but it's there. If you accidentally copied that period from the database name from that earlier page inside a cPanel, all of that stuff will mess up. It will basically not allow your installation to take place. So ensure that that's all correct, and if you're sure that it's correct, the likely next problem is this database host name. And if that's the issue, contact your host, ask them what value you need to use to connect to your MySQL database, and then just simply input the value that they give you. There are some hosts that use different values than localhost, but 99 times out of 100, you won't need to do anything with this value. Under database table prefix, you'll see that WordPress has pre-populated it with wp_. And most people just simply leave this exactly as is. This is not wise because, again, anytime that you're doing a installation that's generic, meaning it's set up just like almost everyone else's WordPress installation, in other words, those that don't know how to improve their WordPress security, you make it easier for the hackers to basically find your information and access your information. So we want unique values whenever possible. Localhost is not one of those areas. We can't change that. But the database table prefix is, and we don't want to leave it as wp_. We want to change this wp to something else. You do need the underscore, so don't remove that. Go back to random.org. I'm not going to get a 12-string character. I want something kind of short. I'm looking for something that's, I don't know, kind of maybe just a segment of this. Kind of like that. Maybe I'll actually grab the 5 too. And I'll copy this portion. Simply just, mostly numbers, some lowercase, some uppercase, a numeric value. It's simply what I'm looking at. And I'm not looking for a really long string. I don't want to make the database tables unnecessarily long. But I'm going to replace WP, again, being really careful not to. Of course, I can always type it back in, but I don't want to do that. I'm going to replace WP with the new value. I'm also going to take the time to copy this right now and add this back into my site details just for future reference. Even though I can access it from inside of cPanel, I'm just going to keep it on my running file just so I know. Once that's done, click Submit. And you see it says you made it through the installation. WordPress can now communicate with your database. If that's what you've seen, if that's what you're seeing rather, you've done everything correctly. You can just run the install. Again, if you have a message that says that it can't communicate with the database, you can click your browser's back button and double check the values and try it again. So I'm going to click Run the Install. and there's another page that comes up. It allows us to give it our site a site title. This is not important at this point. I'm just going to type in some stuff so you can see it populate on the site as we get to it. These are elements that can be easily changed inside of WordPress without any problem. You do need to create a username and a password in order for you to be able to log into WordPress. And you can see that WordPress is still, even today, it's pre-populating the username with the value admin. Would prefer that they didn't, but they are. Do not use a username of admin. Any, newbie hacker out there knows that if you're using admin, then the account that they're hacking into basically has administrator rights. And if they can get into your WordPress installation with administrator rights, they can pretty much do anything and everything that they want. So using admin as your username is a very bad idea. Instead, I'm actually going to recommend that you use an icky password. Yes?
Oh, I was just going to mention that, yeah, you don't want to use something that's easily guessed. If your site is like, sailingboats.com, you don't want sailing boats to be your username. If you have your own personal site and your name's Steve, you don't want Steve as your username. You want something that's completely garbage, which will show a little bit more why.
Like, how about that?
That's very nice. Can you pronounce that?
No. So this does not include any name that's part of a dictionary. You can't search a dictionary if you're using a password cracker to crack the username field. It's obviously not using any real names. It's using a variety of lowercase, uppercase, numbers, letters, etc. This is going to be quite hard to crack. Not that it's impossible, but it makes it very, very difficult, and something that is not going to be, basically going to happen by those that are basically new or beginner type hackers. It would really take someone who had serious skills, and they are likely not going to care about your site unless you're running something really, really big. So you can see here that underneath it says usernames can only have alphanumeric characters, spaces, underscores, hyphens, periods, and the @ symbol. So, if you wanted to, to improve this, you could include the @ symbol, you could include an underscore, hyphens, periods, etc. That's entirely up to you. But just make sure it's something like Jerry just mentioned, that it can't be easily guessed. A lot of people, if they don't use admin, let's say this is live training URL, very frequently, and if you want to go mess around yourself, just don't do anything nefarious. You can try to, if they don't use admin, which they frequently do, they frequently initialize the site, like live L training T URL U. You might be LTU admin. That's one of the more frequent ones that I've seen and come across. Again, any of that stuff that can be easily guessed just makes your installation that less secure. Same thing for password. We need to repeat it twice. You can click the again button and it'll randomize again if you consider maybe you've used the same thing twice. And I like that one just fine. So I'm going to use this one. And again, you can inject these characters here if you want to make it even stronger, and might as well. So in here for password, I'm going to type, I'm going to paste this here first, and I like the percentage sign because it's easy for me to see. I can see it in my password. Question marks are pretty good too, so I'm going to use this as the password. I'll just save it and then copy it back out of here. It's going to tell me that it's mismatched temporarily, and then it's going to tell me that that's strong. And also, I'm going to copy my username out of here before we go any further. So we have the WordPress username and the password for our installation. In regards to email address, this email address is going to be used for the main administrator, and it's going to be used anytime someone makes a comment, if comments are open on your site and a comment is held in moderation, etc. So that's the email that you would want to use. When putting this here, I'm just going to put a fake one. And lastly, we have the ability to either, at the moment, ask the search engines basically to not index our content, or to say, yes, we want our content indexed. If this is a brand new installation and you're still just beginning work on it, I would recommend that you leave it in privacy mode and don't let search engines find your content, and of course others, prior to you being able to finish everything off. But it's entirely up to you, and again, this selection is easily changed inside of WordPress, so it's not something that we're stuck to. Click Install WordPress, and it says WordPress has been installed. It's going to repeat our username in case we forgot to copy it. It will not show us the password again, so hopefully you remember to copy it from the last step. And then you can click Login. And Login will take us right to the WordPress login page. If we go back now to the actual home page of the site, you will see that WordPress has installed a default theme. They've also done a few other things like installing they've created a sample page by default, a sample post, a sample comment, a sample category, etc. These are things that we're going to want to clean up prior to finishing this installation and starting to add real content. But the first kind of segment, the first foundation of this is now done. We've installed WordPress in such a manner that it is more secure than probably 90% of most WordPress installations. And it's that way primarily because not only did we use HTTPS, when doing all of this work, SFTP when uploading, but in addition to that, and of course making sure that our machine was clean prior to doing this work is important. But in addition to that, we have usernames and passwords that are not easily guessed. They're not easily crackable. We've got a unique WordPress database table prefix that, again, is not the standard WP underscore. So we've already made everything more secure just simply by the way we've installed WordPress, and that's basically the point that we want to drive home. All right. So now that that's done, we have some other things to do. Basically, we're going to do some basic WordPress hardening techniques. Then we're going to move on to some intermediate, and then not that they're really all that advanced, but we're going to move on to some advanced. So the basic WordPress hardening techniques are these, and I'm going to show you kind of live how some of these kind of work. One of the ways that WordPress hackers, or one of the things that they look for when determining, what they want to hack, what sites they want to hack and how they want to approach hacking a site, is to try to determine the version of WordPress that is currently running on the site. Now, I don't want you to think that this particular topic is incredibly crucial. It probably isn't that crucial if you're running at least pretty new versions of WordPress, but it can be. And if at all possible, you want to hide from the hackers what version of WordPress you're running. Now, the problem basically is this. By default, WordPress outputs that information to the source code. So let me show you that. If I view the source for our new site, right here in the source code, if you just scroll down just a little bit under these link statements, you will find this meta statement right here. And it says meta name equals generator content equals WordPress 3.3.2. So if a hacker wanted to find out what version of WordPress you're running, by default, all they have to do is just quickly view your source, and there it is. That's one way they can do it. Another way they can do it is by looking to see if you've left the readme.html file inside of your installation. It is one of the files that is included with WordPress. So here's the next way to check on your site, if you have a live site, you can check it, / just type readme altogether.html and hit enter. This can be called up in a browser. So again, right here at the very top is the WordPress version number, and it's sitting right here. Now this is a good file, maybe for you to keep around for the future. It includes information on how to do a full manual installation. Of course, they're calling it a 5-minute install, and the process really is very fast. The longest part of the process, again, really is FTPing the files from your machine to your server. But that information is here, so you certainly might want to keep that information around. You just don't want it on your server. You don't want it sitting here. It just gives them just too much information. They don't need to know all of this stuff, specifically the version. So we want to delete this file off the server as well as some others. So let me show you what I'm talking about. If we log in, let me go back to a blank tab. And actually, let's go to Securi first. So if we go to securi.net, sucuri.net, this is the site that I mentioned earlier that basically offers a free scan service, and of course they're doing that not only to be helpful, but they're doing that because they offer paid security services for your website security. And Jerry, my training partner on this, has used them in the past successfully, as have many others that we know, and have found them to be a quality company. So while I can't vouch for them 100%, I do believe that they offer legitimate and real services, so it's something to look into. The first thing that you can do is to scan your website. It's a fast and free process. You simply just enter your URL. So I'll just put in the brand new URL, the domain name that we just installed just minutes ago, and click Scan this site. It'll take just very little time, and it'll return this page back to us. So this is a good thing. We obviously want everything to be green. You can see that it's giving us a list. Currently, it doesn't find that our domain or IP has been blacklisted. It didn't find any malware, malicious JavaScript, malicious iframes, etc. It's saying that, again up here, that we are not blacklisted, which is a good thing. You can get blacklisted if you have malicious code running on your site. When the search engines find that, they're obviously going to protect their user base from sites that they believe might infect their user base. So they want to protect Google searchers or Bing searchers, etc. And you can get yourself blacklisted with the search engines, which basically means that until you get things fixed, all of your search engine listings can go away, or they will pop up basically special pages that say that your site is basically dangerous and basically warns everybody to stay away. All of that stuff is obviously not good. So what we're trying to prevent is that from ever happening in the future, and that's the goal. Under Website Details, the second tab, we're going to see some things here, and lo and behold, anybody that just wants to go ahead and put in your URL, and they don't have to own it in order to use this service, can see that the application is WordPress 3.3.2, your WordPress version is 3.3.2, etc. You'll also notice right here that there's an additional problem, and it says that the WordPress internal path, or the path to WordPress, to the index.php file that we scanned, it's in home and then livedos right here. And if you recall from our installation, if I bring up that installation file, you'll recall that that value is right here. And if you remember what I told you that was, it is the cPanel username. So here's a problem. Currently, just by running a quick scan over at Securi, hackers can know two things. They can immediately know what version of WordPress you're using, and if you're running on an old version of WordPress, they can obviously find what vulnerabilities that version had. It speeds up the process in order for them to be able to hack your site, which is not good. The next problem is that they already know your cPanel username. So if they try to, rather than hack into WordPress, they can come over and start trying to hack into your cPanel, because one of the two values has already been basically exposed. We're going to show how to turn that off as well. So those are just two of the many pieces that we're going to help you improve as part of this training. So going back to basic WordPress security and cleanup, what we're going to do is we're going to relog in to the server. Now, right at the moment, it would look and appear to both you and me that we are logged into the server, and I do believe that we are. The problem is that if you're logged in via SFTP, you will find that it times out more frequently than in normal FTP mode, and so it's a good habit if you're using FileZilla or any FTP program that allows it to come up here and click these double arrow icons. It's for refreshing, and we want to see some amount of change go on. You might want to, basically click this folder that has the double dots to go up a level, and you can see that it's not allowing me to do that. That's because it looks like we're logged in, but in reality, we're really not. It's timed out, and you can see right here, connection timed out, failed to retrieve directory listing. So someone asked what the downside is to using SFTP. The downside is basically this: in security, there is a phrase that says good security is not convenient, and that is very much true. And anybody that's ever been through the airport knows that. The stronger the security is, the more inconvenient it is, and that's typically the case. And so I'm hoping that you're not going to abandon the use of SFTP just because it is somewhat less convenient. Security is extremely important, and I would choose strong security and a little inconvenience over ease of use with lax security measures. So what you need to know is that even though it looks like we're logged in, we've been timed out. So I'm going to click the refresh button again, and this time everything seems to have worked fine. You can see up here that the status now is directory listing successful, which is what I want. So we're back in the root directory. Again, we're in the root directory for where we installed WordPress. You can see the three WordPress folders or directory names: WordPress admin, content, and includes, and lower down some other files. This file here is that README file that we mentioned that exposes the WordPress version. We want to remove it. Right above it is another file called license.txt. This is simply your license for use of WordPress, and again, I don't recommend that you get rid of it off your machine. It's good to have, but you don't need it on your server. So I'm going to left click on license. I'm going to hold down my control key in this case, and I'm going to left click on README such that I've selected both. Then I'm going to right click. Again, this is using FileZilla, and I'm going to select delete. Now, please be careful whenever you're deleting anything out of the WordPress core. Make sure that you know specifically what you're deleting and don't delete anything else. So it's wise to go slow and to pause and to make sure that you're doing exactly what you want to do and nothing else, because you can significantly mess things up if you delete the wrong file. So I'm going to delete. It's going to ask me if I want to, and I say yes. Those two files are now gone. Next, I'm going to show you here that the wp-config.php file exists.
Kevin?
Yes.
Kevin, your audio
has broken up.
Yeah, right after you said next.
Okay. So we picked up. We got the deletion of the license.txt file and the readme.html file. Is that correct? That part came through?
Yes, it was as soon as you said next and changed.
Okay. So after deleting license.txt and readme.html, the next bit of cleanup is this. Look for your wp-config.php file. Again, this is the file that did not exist initially, and right next to it you will find the wp-config sample file. The sample file is the one that was right here on the server initially, and it's no longer needed. This was only needed during that guided process. So do not delete the standard config file, only the one that says -sample. Let me say that one more time because it's extremely important. Only delete the file named wp-config-sample.php. I'm going to left click on it to activate. You can see it's blue. Right click and I'm going to choose delete. That file is now gone. Are we good, Jerry?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Next, there are two other files that exist on the server that we do not need anymore, and they can decrease your security, so we're going to get rid of them too. But before I do, I'll point the browser to them. If we go back to your site, and after your main domain name, you put in wp-admin/install.php. This is one of two install files that were basically used during that guided process that were helping us create the installation. Now that we've created the installation, they're no longer needed. So put in your domain name, yourdomainname.com, whatever your domain name happens to be, /wp-admin, all lowercase, /install.php, and hit enter. If you get a blank screen, or if you get a screen that shows you already installed, this is not good. You don't want this information here. So we're going to delete this file and one other that's right next to it called install-helper, and you will see that now. So we need to get inside of the wp-admin directory or folder, if that's what you're used to calling it. Double-click the icon, the folder icon, and scroll down until we find those two PHP files. Again, they're right next to each other, which is nice. It's install-helper and install. Again, go slow. Make sure that you know specifically what you're removing and don't remove anything else. So install-helper, I'm going to hold down my control key. I'm going to left click on install so that both of those are now selected. Of course, you can do them one by one. It's entirely up to you. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose delete. And then I'm going to pause and make sure that those were the two that I wanted to delete. You'll see that now they're kind of a light gray, but you can still see which two files are affected. And if you've done something wrong, now's the time to say no. If you've done it right, you choose yes, excuse me, and we will have removed those files as well. So again, the basic WordPress hardening techniques, a quick review, is we're going to remove from the main root directory area of WordPress, we're going to remove license.txt, also remove readme.html, also wp-config-sample.php, again, -sample.php. Do not remove wp-config. You need that. Next, go into the wp-admin directory and remove the install.php file and the install-helper.php file. Yes, Jerry?
Just wanted to point out, if you accidentally remove one of the other files, you can go back into the zip file, the original distribution files, and copy them over. A common thing is accidentally removing the index.php when removing license or readme, and you can just copy it, just upload it again if you accidentally do it. But you should do, you need to do that right away before anything happens. The only file that's really specific is don't delete wp-config, because you can't upload that back up again. You have to do the reinstall.
Yeah, the reason is that during the installation process, specific instructions from you during that guided process have been written to this file. So this file now right here, the wp-config file, is now customized, and it is different from the contents that was initially found in wp-config sample. So these two files are no longer the same. What Jerry is basically mentioning is that you can very easily put back license.txt or readme.html if you wanted to. There's really no reason to do that, but you could. Same thing with the install and install helper files. These have not changed. They are exactly as they were, so if you wanted to re-upload them to WP admin, you could easily do that without changing anything. The most crucial file, as Jerry just mentioned, as part of this process is the wp-config.php file. Again, make sure that stays on the server. Only remove the wp-config-sample.php file. Okay, so with that done now, we've improved things just a little bit. It's not like we have some incredibly secure WordPress installation, but if we go back to our site now and I refresh this, we get basically a not found because, of course, we've removed that file altogether, and that's a good thing. We don't want anybody to be able to find our install.php file. Similarly, of course, if we go to readme.html, we're going to get the exact same thing. We're going to get a 404 error because that file does not exist on the server any longer either. However, if we go look over at Securi or we look at the source, we're still going to see the WordPress version number, and we're still going to see the cPanel username. We're going to get rid of those two as part of the process as we go along. So we've done some things to improve, but we're not there yet. Let's see. Taking a look at my notes. Also, here's another thing that we're going to improve, and we'll show you this live. We'll go back to the WP WordPress login page. You can get there by either typing after your domain name /WP admin, or you can use wp-login.php. Either way will take you to the same place. I'll just use WP admin since it's easier to remember. It's going to redirect us basically to the WordPress login page, this page here. Well, we know our username and our password. We've created very hard to guess, hard to crack usernames and password, which is good for us, bad for hackers, which is what we want. But what you're going to see here is WordPress is going to reveal more information than they should to someone trying to log in. So here's the thing. A lot of hackers will come by and they'll immediately type in admin because they'll assume that you left an account named admin there, and they'll type in just some gibberish just to show you, just to see if maybe admin is correct. And they'll click login. Immediately, we're given a message that says invalid username. Well, there's no reason to reveal this information. What this is telling the visitor immediately is that the username that I entered, admin, is not correct. So that's a good thing. It basically tells them, hey, look, you didn't run across someone who's using the admin username, so they know already that you've taken more steps to harden your security than average. Of course, if they try to dial up readme.html and they see that's gone too, that they're already getting a clue that you're someone that actually cares and knows a little bit about security, which is good. But still, there's no reason to reveal the username or the fact that the username is invalid. There's no reason to reveal that. Here's an example. Let's say, for example, that I did use admin, because we didn't. We use this funky one over here. But in this case, just visualize with me that that's really admin. Let's say they guessed the username right, and they type in some random string and they click login. The new thing that we're going to get is, it says the password you entered for the username is incorrect. What that immediately tells them is that they guessed the username right, or they cracked the username right. Now they only have to work on value number 2. So, for example, if we had left the username set to admin and I just typed in gibberish and hit login, it would have said the password you entered for username admin is incorrect. In other words, they would have immediately known that the username for WordPress was admin. And like I said, initially, it doesn't take a genius to figure out if you are using a username named admin, then it's likely that that account holder is an administrator level account that can do basically anything and everything inside of WordPress. So this is something else that we want to fix. And there's a number of different ways you can do it. However, Jerry has been kind enough to code a very simple plugin that will help us do two things. It will help us change and improve that. I'm back over here because I must have clicked on something. I know that's not there. It'll help us improve and remove the too much information supplied by WordPress during login. It'll also remove the WordPress version from the source code. So let's go into WordPress here real quick with the correct details. And the next step we're going to do is to go to plugins and we'll install. One real quick note before I do, I see that there's an update here. It's basically saying that there's one plugin update, and I know that this is Akismet. So by default, WordPress installed two plugins, one Akismet, which is a comment spam plugin, and one called Hello Dolly. Neither one of these are needed. You can delete both of them unless, of course, you want to run Akismet. Just note that Akismet, while it does work to a degree, if you're running a commercial site, per their license, you have to pay $5 per month in order to use it on every site that you want to use it. I know a lot of people use it basically outside of their terms of service, basically illegally. Of course, we don't advise that. So if you're going to use it, great. You can go ahead and leave it. If you're not going to use it, there's no reason to leave it here. You can just delete it. You can click delete and delete individually and then say yes and just delete it. Hello Dolly, again, you can either leave or include when you want to. The only thing that it basically does is helps you know that your plugin's functionality is working correctly. If we activate it, you'll see right here that there's a small bit of text that says, golly gee fellas. And if I refresh, we'll see it change while the band's playing. Refresh again, we see you're still glowing, you're still crowing. It's basically just lines of text from the song Hello Dolly. All this is telling you is that your plugin functionality is working properly, so it is a good little piece of kit to keep around for debugging if you think that you're having issues with basically how your plugins are working in general. But of course, you can always get it back from WordPress.org. So my suggestion to you is if you're not using it, delete it, and you need to deactivate it in order to do that. So I'll deactivate first and delete, and we'll basically remove any unnecessary plugins. One thing to note, I should have made mention before, prior to installing, deleting, or doing anything really inside of WordPress, especially as it pertains to WordPress security, you really should back up first. So I guess I'm going to jump backwards and just talk a little bit about backing up before doing anything else, because it really should be done in that order. So you can back up a number of different ways. What you want to back up basically at minimum is your full WordPress database, and you also want to download or back up. Put this back to this tab so I can show you. You wanted to back up your entire WP content directory. So if you did nothing else, you could download this off of your server to your local machine at the point that you were going to do work. You can simply do that by selecting the area of your machine that you want to move it to over here, right-clicking, and then choosing download to download the contents of the content directory and the directory itself to your machine. The WP content -content directory includes basically, and we're getting a notice again that basically it failed to retrieve. That's because it has timed out on us again. So that's what's going on. I'm going to double click WP content. This is where all of our new stuff is going to go. Plugins, themes, images that are being uploaded. We haven't uploaded any images, etc. All of them are going to be contained within this directory. So it's really kind of all of the additional pieces of technology that we're adding to our WordPress installation. As far as content is concerned, the actual text, page content, post content, comments from visitors, etc., all of that is stored in the WordPress database. So again, if you don't have Backup Buddy, which is our suggested solution for you, I mean, it's really, in my opinion, it should be a required element. It should be the one thing that you definitely invest your money into. But if you don't or can't, just make sure that you have a full WordPress database backup, and you make sure that you have downloaded the full contents of the WordPress content directory, just like I've just shown you. As far as the database is concerned, you can download the database from inside of cPanel. You can do it a number of different ways. Let's see if I can look for the proper area. I don't do it through here because I use Backup Buddy, but let's see, I'm looking for backups, which is here under Files, and then Backups. You have the ability to download a full backup of your entire home or root directory, or you can download MySQL databases individually. So you can see the database name here. And this is the one that we created for our WordPress installation. And this utility will give you the ability to download a backup of your MySQL database. So that's one way to do it. You can also do it through phpMyAdmin. You can also do it through a plugin. There's a number of plugins out there in addition to Backup Buddy. One of them is called wp-DB Backup, available for free through the WordPress.org directory, wp-DB Backup. It will not do a full site backup like Backup Buddy will. It will only back up the database, but if you want to do it through a plugin as opposed to doing it from inside of cPanel, that's one way to do it. I think, Jerry, you also use a service over at iDrive. Is that correct? Or have?
Right. I use a plugin from iDrive that gives you a 5 gig backup. I kind of use it as a backup for my backup.
Okay, let me jump over to that. Is it iDrive.com?
Yeah, but it's not the main iDrive service. They have it. iDrive itself is a online storage, but they have a product that is through the WordPress repository that's free.
Okay, so you can actually find it through WordPress?
Yeah, and it gives you a 5 gig backup. It's not as robust or as full-featured as like Backup Buddy. It's mainly just does backups and keeps storing them.
Right, but it's a plugin, correct?
Yeah, it's a plugin.
Okay, so you can go to WordPress.org and then click Plugins. It'll take you to WordPress.org/extend/plugins. And is it all one word, do you know?
Yeah, it should be all one word.
Okay, search plugins for iDrive, and here we go. So you're going to have an iDrive account, I'm assuming?
Yeah, you set up an account through the plugin. It's all done. It's a separate account from an iDrive regular account. It's all done. It's free. It seems to work great for me as just an additional method, but I'm using Backup Buddy on my sites now.
Right. So the full plugin name is iDrive for WordPress, if you want to do some searching on it. The other one that I mentioned is wp-DB Backup, and I don't know if it's that way or not, but we'll look for it and see if we could find it. So it's wp-DB Backup, but this is the correct one. See that both of those plugins have a star rating of 4 out of 5. Both of those will help you back up your WordPress database via plugins. The iDrive plugin and functionality, even though I've never used it personally because I use Backup Buddy, but in talking to Jerry, who was using it previously, it does more than just a database backup. It actually backs up other files too. So I'd probably suggest you look into iDrive first if you're not getting Backup Buddy. But again, Backup Buddy is what we use and wholeheartedly recommend. So what we're going to do is we're going to, since you now have a couple of different options, right? You can back up your database through cPanel or through PHPMyAdmin if that's the route you want to go. Back up your database and, like I said, then download the content, the entire wp-content directory. Pretty much everything else, unless you've customized your installation and you've added new directories and moved high-tech stuff around, you should be fine. The rest of the WordPress installation is all the core files. So as long as you have a copy of the same version of the files that you initially used on your machine, you should be fine. You might also want to make sure that you do a copy of the wp-config file, just in case you haven't updated that on your machine, because that file is customized as well. So having done a backup, whichever way you've done it, you can start going through the next steps. I'm going to quickly add Backup Buddy, and I'm going to show you how it's used to basically do a full and entire backup. I'm not going to go through all of the feature set of Backup Buddy. It would take far too long during this training, but I'm at least going to show you how simple it is to create a full and entire backup. When I say full and entire, I mean it literally saves just about everything from your themes to your plugins to your database to all of your settings, etc. Pretty much everything stays intact to the degree that you can actually take it and move it to a new server. You can take it and restore to it almost with just a couple of clicks, which is, of course, the power behind it, or one of the pieces or power behind it is the ability to back up. So I'm going to install a new plugin. I went to Plugins, Add New. I'm going to choose Upload. Since this is a plugin that I have on my machine, you will not find this over at WordPress.org. It is a premium plugin available at pluginbuddy.com. I'm going to click the Browse button to browse. We will go find the appropriate folder. When you install through WordPress, you're installing plugins in zip format, so just a quick side note on that. I'm going to select Backup Buddy, and I'm going to click Install Now. Of course, I could also install this just raw through FTP, so it's really just what you're comfortable with. Either way works just fine. You can see that it's unpacked and installed successfully. You can activate straight from here, but I'm going to go back to the plugins page. And once here, you'll see that everything's fine. I'm going to activate the plugin. And now that it's activated, you'll see that there's a new feature down here called Backup Buddy, and there's a number of options. You can perform a malware scan from inside the tool itself. What you need to know is the malware scan is exactly the same tool. It's using the same exact tool that's supplied over at security.net. So running the scan is the same exact thing. You can just run it inside of your WordPress installation as opposed to having to do it over at Securi. It's the same scan. There is some information in regards to your server information, so you might want to check that first. It gives you some basic information in regards to your server configuration. So it's going to tell me my WordPress version is okay because it's greater than 3.0, and it's going to tell us the value of it. It's going to say that our MySQL version is okay, and it's going to tell us what version of MySQL we're running. Same thing with PHP, etc., etc., etc. If you get any reds over here, for instance, if your MySQL version was red or your PHP version was red, you're going to want to talk to your host to see if they can upgrade your version of MySQL and or PHP. Again, prior to asking them to do that, make sure you have a full backup. this is one of those areas where, most trainers, when they start talking about WordPress security, only really focus on WordPress itself, and that is just, it's not a good thing, because WordPress security is much bigger than simply WordPress itself. If the software running on your server is strongly out of date, it is possible that some of the upgrades made to PHP or MySQL, etc., may have been made because they found security holes in the software itself. And if you're running older versions, it is possible that just running that older version of the software on your site may give you a greater exposure to risk as well. So that's just something to note. Down here, you'll notice that there's a number of things that it checked in terms of my PHP settings. We'll talk more about that later, but one of them failed. One of them says it's red. It does not like the fact that something called PHP register globals has a value of enabled. In other words, PHP register globals is on and it should be off, and we're going to fix that through this process. So just, there's some basic security information that you can glean simply straight from looking inside of the Backup Buddy plugin itself. But what I'm going to do now is only talk about the backup and restore area. Click on that tab. We have the ability through Backup Buddy to do simply just a database backup or a full backup, and you see it says backup everything. You can also get two other scripts that work in conjunction with Backup Buddy, one of which is Import Buddy, and if you click this, it'll download Import Buddy to your machine. If you click this one, it'll download Repair Buddy to your machine. You'll notice that Repair Buddy is currently in beta. I have not yet used this. I've not had a reason to use it, but it attempts basically to repair damaged databases. That's its goal. Import Buddy, you can see it says restoring or migrating. It's a migration script. This is what allows you to move your WordPress installation from one host to another, one domain to another, etc. But right now we're talking about backups. So I want to make a full backup before I do anything else, and it's as easy as simply just clicking on this big squarish button. Since our installation is new and doesn't have a whole lot of content, it won't take that long to complete. Once it does, you'll get a notification that you've had success, and it'll give you a link to back up the zip archive. So if I click this, you'll see that we get a dialog box that says, where do you want to save this file? So you save that off of your server, save that somewhere to your machine. You'll see that it's included a date string and a bunch of randomness too, to make it pretty much impossible for someone just to browse your server and find. But the date obviously is a good indicator for you as to when the backup was made. I'm not going to save it and take the time, but you get the idea. Create the full backup, download it off the server. That's the first step. The second step, though, is this. You click back to backup page, and it gives you a listing of all of your backup files. What you need to know is that this is currently being stored on the server. It says that the status of the backup it is good. You want to make sure that that's the case before doing anything else. If there's some type of a failure with the backup, it will tell you that there's a failure. And the type of database, or the type of backup rather, was full, as opposed to just a database backup. If we had done a database backup, it will allow you to know that right there in the type. So we've created the backup, we've downloaded it off the server to our machine, but the copy still resides there, and we don't want that. So tick the box, click delete, and make sure that you delete that file. One other thing to note, I'm not going to get into setup, but Backup Buddy does have the ability to set up remote destinations. By that I mean you can set it to back up and send the file rather than to your server. You can send it to your Amazon S3 account, Rackspace Cloud files. You can even have it sent to you via email, which quite honestly isn't that secure, or even FTP it to an entirely different server. So that's available to you as well. And I'm not going to get into the setup, but I also mentioned scheduling, since routine backups are wise to do, and of course they're a challenge to do if you always have to do it manually. Backup Buddy, another feature, is the ability to schedule backups. So you can schedule backups to run either database or full, and you can cause them to be run hourly, daily, weekly, twice a month, or just monthly, etc. And you can even, when they're run, have them shipped to the same remote destination or wherever you'd like it shipped. So again, this is a lot of the horsepower and the reason why we really recommend Backup Buddy above any of the other solutions that we've tried, and we've tried many of them. So now that the full backup is done, I can go back to plugins, which is where I was headed before. And you can see that at the moment, the only plugin that we have running is Backup Buddy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually upload and activate the simple security plugin that Jerry has created and we are supplying to you. Click Add New. I'll click Upload. I'll browse for it. It's currently named Simple Security. I'll click Open, Install Now, and then I'll just go ahead and activate it. Actually, we'll return to the plugins page like I did before. So the name of the plugin is Simple Security. You'll see the description. It tells you exactly what it does. It only does two things. It removes the meta generator. Again, this is just the WordPress version number showing up in your source code, and it changes how WordPress handles the login errors so that it doesn't reveal too much information. And I'll click Activate. It's thinking. Okay, so now we have both Backup Buddy and Simple Security activated. Let's go back to our site, and we'll go back to our home page. If we view the source code again, we are going to find that before, underneath the links area, which is right here, there was the meta generator that was outputting the WordPress version. So that's no longer being output to the source code. And we removed the readme.html file, so it's no longer being found over there as well. I'm not going to say that it's impossible for someone to determine your WordPress version, but as far as the easy ability to do that, is gone and has been reduced. If we go to the WordPress login page again, wp-admin, I guess I'll do. Oh, I'm logged in. Let me log out. We're back on the page. If I put in anything, and it doesn't really matter, I could use the right username or the fake one or something else, and it doesn't really matter. It's only going to return this error message and nothing else. So no longer will it say that, basically you've used the right username, but you got the password wrong, or the username was incorrect. It's just going to tell you that the entered credentials are now incorrect. So the Simple Security plugin that Jerry coded and is available to you, it's, like I said, it's very simple. It's not like it's going to make your WordPress installations immediately secure all in of itself, but it does do two very nice, nifty little things. And because it's a plugin, it's theme independent. So regardless of what theme you have active, these two pieces of information will be the same. Your login page won't reveal too much information, and your source code will not reveal the WordPress version in it. If we go back to Sakuri, go back to the home, let's run the scan again and just double check. I do believe that we're also going to have stopped it showing over here, but I want to double check and make sure that's accurate. Go back to website details, and that's not accurate. So unfortunately, even with our Simple Security, unless, yeah, it is. It's finding it anyway, unfortunately.
It's finding it because WordPress puts it in common JS.
Yeah, you can see it's inside of the...
It looks for a fingerprint, but if you were to actually search or Google, which is the #1 way that they find your version, when they go out and look, typically hackers look for WordPress version 3.3.2, it won't show up because the generator is not there. It's not in common.js, but what it is, it looks at the size of common.js and will do the version. So the version's gone from the generator.
Yeah.
So it's gone from Google.
The plugin has done its job. Unfortunately, like I said, the more talented a hacker is, the more capability they have to find things, even though you're hardening things. It's still a wise thing to do. It's still one of those things where I do recommend that you remove the readme.html file and that you do potentially either use the simple security plugin that was provided to you or remove it other ways. There's other ways to remove it as well through the functions.php file. We'll talk a little bit about that as we continue on. You don't have to use the plugin in order to affect the two pieces of change that we have. The only difficulty is, or the challenge rather, is adding the content that you have to add to the functions.php file is a little bit more technical. That's the first challenge. The second challenge is it's theme dependent. So if you are running theme 1 and you've updated the functions.php file to not reveal the WordPress version in the source or change the login error message, as soon as you change themes, your security measures basically go away. So the plugin is a little bit more handy in terms of that. But that's what you need to know. Currently, we're still seeing the cPanel username, and that's because we haven't made the PHP change necessary to turn that off. I just wanted to point that out as we're going through the process. So look at my my list real quick. I think we've done all of the basic work, and we have. So the next step basically is to do a little more poking around inside of your actual installation. And let me log back into WordPress. There are some cool plugins that will give you some functionality. They give you the ability basically they basically run security reports and will tell you, where your security is strong and or weak. Now, we've already mentioned this, and if I haven't, and it really doesn't matter, we're going to mention it again. We would strongly recommend that you don't do ever these two things. You never search a search engine, Google or otherwise, for free WordPress themes or for free plugins or for free widgets or for free WordPress anything else that you can come up with. Unless you are extremely adept, extremely skilled at scanning code, it can be extremely hard for you to know whether code has already been infected with a variety of different types of security risks. And many of the free themes out there, many of the free plugins out there that are not being offered through the WordPress.org directory do have malicious code already installed. So if you are looking for a free theme over at Google or Yahoo or Bing, etc., please know that you are taking a huge risk. I don't care how nice the theme might be to look at. There is a very huge risk if you don't have the skill and talent to look through all of the code to make sure that it is in fact clean and free of malicious code. It is very, very unwise to go that route. So in terms of the two security plugins that I'm about to mention, one of them is a free plugin. We'll go to Add New, and is available through WordPress.org, again, the actual WordPress.org directory, the only place that we would ever recommend that you look for a free plugin unless you really, really know the source of the plugin. If you know a provider or you know the reputation of a provider really, really well, then that might be one of the only times that it might be okay. You'd still be wise to scan the files or have someone else who has that skill scan the files for you. But generally speaking, if you're looking for free stuff in terms of WordPress, it probably should come from wordpress.org. So in order to do that, I've gone to plugins, add new. This time, instead of uploading, we'll search, and we're going to search for Ultimate Security Checker. And you'll see that that's the actual name of the plugin, Ultimate Security Checker by Eugene, and it currently has about a 4.25 star rating. So I'm going to go ahead and install the Ultimate Security Checker to my installation. Again, remember, as you're doing this, it would be really important, especially if you have content on your site, to do a full backup, or at minimum backup the database in your content, WP content directory, prior to adding new plugins, etc. So the plugin has been installed, and I'll go ahead and just activate it straight from here. So Ultimate Security Checker, again, is the free one that we're going to demonstrate. We're also going to show you another security plugin called Security Ninja. This one, however, is not free. It's not expensive, but it's not free. And it's a premium plugin that you can get at codecanyon.net. I'll probably take you over there and show you that here in a bit, but codecanyon.net is where Security Ninja comes from, and it is a paid plugin. I think it's about $10, $15, something like that. I'm going to click Browse. I'm going to find Security Ninja on my machine, click Open, and then click Install Now. And we'll go ahead and activate the plugin as well. So now we have 2 security plugins active, and you don't need both. You can simply just use Ultimate Security Checker if you just want to go with the free version. I prefer Security Ninja only because its report is closer in keeping with my view of WordPress security, number one, and the reporting process is both prettier to look at and it's a little bit more detailed. However, that being said, Ultimate Security Checker does actually work quite well, so that's entirely up to you. We're actually going to run both and just compare them against themselves. Ultimate Security Checker outputs a numerical value. It's just its own algorithm for what it thinks our blog security is. You'll notice that there's this new yellow bit of text up here that says check your blog security. Because we have activated it but we haven't run it for the first time, there's no numerical value. So you can just click the yellow text to check. It's going to run the test, and wow, look, we've hardly done anything. We've already come up with an A grade, so it says, and it's given us a score of 98 out of 115 security points for our installation. So that's pretty cool. Well, what it didn't like, the worst grade of this, is the C grade for check the configuration file, again referring to the wp-config file. And it says that the file is located in an unsecure place, or an unsecured place. Basically all that means is that it's in the same location that it was by default through WordPress, and that the area within the root directory, let me open up the root directory so you can see it. I'll click refresh. It's probably timed us out. One quick thing you can do in FileZilla, if you're using SFTP, you see this red flag that has the X. If it's red, you can click it to cancel the current operation, say yes. Click refresh again, and that will speed up the process of reconnecting. Just a quick little tip. If it's black like this, it's not accessible. wp-config. It is right here inside of the root directory, and the Ultimate Security Checker isn't happy. It wants us to basically move it to a secure location. Well, what does that mean? Basically, it means this. Remember that right now we are inside of our root directory for our hosting account, public_HTML. If I double-click this folder icon, again, which in FTP is indication to you that you're moving up a level. I'll double click it. You'll see now that here's the public underscore HTML that we were just in. There's also public underscore FTP, Perl 5, mail, etc., TMP, www, etc. There's a number of directories that are basically above or outside of the public underscore HTML directory. WordPress is really smart, and it actually will allow you to move the wp-config file up one level or outside of the root directory. What you need to know is that none of these other directories are accessible by the public. Only the public underscore HTML is. So when they talk about unsecured, what they're really saying is they're unhappy that we've left the wp-config.php file inside of this directory. They want us to move it such that it would live over here by these files. And you can do that. It will work. I guess, quite quickly. Oops, I went into some wrong area. Let me go back into Home. Go back and look at the public underscore HTML. Okay, so we're back here. We're looking at the WP config file. You can actually take it and move it up a level. And if you want to do that, here's basically how that's done. You navigate in the top panel, kind of where you want it to go, and then you can move it. You can move it a number of different ways, but the easiest way is to basically just click and drag it. You can click and drag it either up in this area, or you can click and drag it. Let me actually make this taller. Probably the easiest way to do it is to click and drag it to this double dot folder. Let it go. You'll see that now it disappears. It's moved it up a level. And if I come look at it, we will now see the wp-config.php file sitting right here. Again, now it's up one level outside of the public underscore HTML directory. And we can go back to WordPress. And let me go to the home page. Let me open up a new tab. We want to. You can see that the site still works. Everything still works just fine. The site's totally intact, and so even moving the wp-config file up that one directory level, WordPress is smart enough to know that it actually looks for it there first, and if it doesn't find it, then it looks for it inside of the root. If we go back to Ultimate Security Checker now, and if we run the test again, we're going to see that we get an improvement of our quality score. So we now have an A grade for configuration file, and we've moved our security score from 98 to 101, and of course everything else here is looking pretty good. It does have some information here about our blog can be hacked with malicious URL requests, etc. But overall, it's basically saying that we're doing a really good job. It gave us an A grade again with our security, and again, we have 101 out of 115. Again, this is not WordPress specific as far as this value isn't coming from WordPress or anything else. It's value created nothing more than by the Ultimate Security Checker plugin author. However, even though we've moved it and this plugin happens to like it, neither Jerry and I recommend it, and that's for a number of reasons, and I'll let Jerry speak to that since I hear that he's on.
Well, I was just going to point out that a site that's 101 isn't necessarily more secure than a site that's 98, for example. It just means that they give certain weight to certain things. Right now, the site is actually very vulnerable. We've gotten a lot of things that we left. There's a couple things in code check that we left. So you kind of got to, take the score lightly. I mean, it's improving. That's nice. Getting to 115 isn't going to happen. Whatever. Regarding moving the config file outside is some plugins, some themes, and other things that will go out to possibly use or work with the config file now have it outside of that directory. Also, depending on your and if you have a non-standard configuration of your host, let's say that you were using add-on domains and you had a WP config file moved out to above the add-on domain, it now is shared by a whole bunch of WordPress installs. So I mean, it complicates things, it makes things non-standard, and it really doesn't do a whole lot of good compared to the problems that you can cause.
So therein lies the rub, basically. Our point basically is this. You and you alone will have to make the determination what's right for you in your particular individual setup. Again, we started this whole thing by saying that your server setup may be different than what we're showing you. It's impossible, obviously, for us to show you every single different server environment because they're all unique. But just generally speaking, while I do think this is a very good plugin, and I do agree with a lot of what it has to teach, this is not one of those areas. So even though we've improved our security score in terms of what Ultimate Security Checker is giving us, I would not recommend that you actually move the WP config file outside of the root. I showed it to you simply because I want you to understand what they're talking about. We want to give you basically the tools to understand exactly what's going on, such that you're not just a robot and just have to follow what someone says to you, but you have a good understanding in regards to what they're talking about and some of the ramifications of that. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to left click on it. I'm going to left click and hold, and I'm going to drag it back to public_HTML, and hopefully we haven't timed out. If we have, it won't take, and I'll try it again. Again, this is one of the difficulties with using SFTP. Like I said, it times out much more frequently than using normal. I'm going to go back into public_HTML and just confirm that we have moved it back. So now that we have the WP config file back in its original location, of course, I could run the scan again, and it would tell us basically that we went back to 98. If you're going to use Ultimate Security Checker, please note that there's specific file analysis tabs that'll basically allow you to scan your blog for vulnerabilities, which is kind of cool. It's going to give you some information, some training on how you can fix a number of the items that basically it brings up. Like, for instance, it says config file is located in an unsecured place. You can read more about each one of those options here. And then there's some information on settings. I'm going to get out of this plugin, and we're going to now run a scan with the Security Ninja because this is the one that I use personally and recommend, just because, again, it's more in keeping with what I believe, and it's not perfect, it's more in keeping with what I believe is good, solid WordPress security that's not going to necessarily have you run into issues, as Jerry just pointed out, with plugin conflicts that need to find the WP config file and can no longer because you've moved it, or if you have multiple domains added into one hosting account, like Jerry mentioned, you can't move all of the WP configs out of the root level unless you do some other custom stuff. It is possible, but it's way more techy than what we're going to discuss here, because again, in my opinion, in Jerry's opinion, it's just not necessary. So I'm going to click Run Tests with Security Ninja. It's going to analyze it pretty quickly, and it's going to return a number of reports. And here is basically what the output looks like in terms of Security Ninja. So you can see that there's a lot more values than specifically than Ultimate Security Checker was looking at. And of course, it makes it really easy for us to see, whether whether the Security Ninja believes it's okay or not. These, I'm not going to go into each But basically, obviously it's checking if WordPress is up to date, if plugins are up to date, if themes are up to date, etc. You can just read through these. One of them is a PHP directive. We're going to talk about several PHP directives here in a minute. It wants the expose_PHP directive turned off. And on this server, by default, the server has turned it off, and so it's giving us an OK value. If your server setting was different than ours, and that directive was turned on, this would be red for you. So don't expect that your installation is going to provide you the exact same bit of details that ours is. It's going to be unique to you, but you get some ideas. It's checking if the full WordPress version is revealed in the metadata, that generator again. Since we use Jerry's plugin, it's gone. It's going to check if the README file is still there. It's gone. There's a number of things. It's checking if the username admin exists. It doesn't. It's looking to see if anybody can register to our WordPress blog, which isn't a good idea unless you have a specific reason to do that. That's gone. It actually checked our users' password strength through basically the 600 most commonly used passwords for WordPress. One of the ways that hackers get in is something called a brute force attack, and it's easier for them to pull that off if your password strength is weak. So it likes our password strength, etc. You get the idea. It's also saying, does it display unnecessary information for failed login attempts? That's okay. Again, these two values here, this unnecessary information and also the WordPress version, these are being helped out by Jerry's plugin. So just so you know kind of how that works, if I turn that plugin off, immediately both of these will become red. We're just going to pay attention now to the red categories, and we're going to basically detail what each of these are. So right now it's saying that the display_errors PHP directive should be off, and right now it's turned on. So this would basically allow the hacker to see PHP errors displayed to the public, or anybody from the public. If PHP errors happen, they actually get revealed to the public, and those PHP errors can basically unveil or reveal your paths to all sorts of things, and make it easier for a hacker to know where they need to go to start basically messing with stuff. So this needs to be turned off, and it's currently on this server. This one says, check if the WordPress installation address is the same as the site address. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit. This is one area that neither Jerry and we don't agree with. I don't believe that this that changing or moving the WordPress installation area is really going to give you any real benefit, but there are some drawbacks to it. So we'll talk about this in a little bit. It says check if the wp-config file has the right permissions or file permissions set. It's looked at our server and it's found that the value set for that particular file right now is set to a numerical value of 666, and it's saying that that is not ideal because basically other people can access that file. We want to, instead of, this is where basically this plugin and the Ultimate Security plugin disagree with each other. The Ultimate Security Checker plugin wanted us to move the wp-config file up and outside of the root directory, where Security Ninja is basically wanting us to change the file permissions on this particular file to basically restrict access to the public. And this is something that Jerry and I wholeheartedly agree with. So again, this is one of the reasons why we like this plugin, to use this plugin as opposed to the other, because it's just more in keeping with our own personal slant on WordPress security. It's going to check if the install.php file is accessible. Again, remember that's one of the basic things that we did when we did the installation. We removed it. It wants to see if upgrade.php is accessible. This is another thing that Jerry and I don't recommend that you actually that you don't change. If you do, none of your built-in WordPress updates or upgrades are going to work properly. So while it is a security improvement, it's also going to reduce your own functionality of your site. So again, there's always a push-pull or a pro and con to each one of these things, and you have to think about what's, rather than just follow along like a robot, you kind of have to think about exactly what the end result is going to be if you actually remove or move this file somewhere else. The next is another PHP directive called register globals, register_globals. This is probably the biggest security breach issue of everything that we've talked about. Jerry, do you want to just give a short layman's term thing in regards to what this, leaving this on, what does this do or allow the hacker to do?
Okay. Register globals was something that was designed to make things easier at one point during the early life of PHP. In your code, you have variables that can store things in. And sometimes you'll see what happens is you sometimes will
actually right up here.
Yeah, you'll need to pass different things. And like I was just going to say, is pages equals, is that what, wf-sn. That's passing a variable in a URL. Now, normally what happens with register globals off is the code actually has to go and get that information specifically for pages and then grab the value and put it into the variable. So sometimes it might, so that it can use it. With register globals on, it automatically makes a variable called page with that value. And you're thinking, well, what's the problem with that? The problem is if you were to put like admin equals yes, and in your code you don't realize that somebody could accidentally set your variable outside your code, they could, through a URL, just set variables to particular values and override security or pass other information in. So what's happened is register globals is now turned off on most hosting, but not all. But it should be turned off so that you actually specifically, your code has to go read the variables and they're not automatically made as a global use variable. I know it's a little techy, just turn it off.
So here's my version of that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if someone's talented and knows what to set a variable to, like Jerry just mentioned, admin equals yes, they can visit your site, simply just add the code, $admins equals yes, or whatever that variable is, to your URL. And with register globals on, it will actually allow them to enact that variable. And if that variable admin equals yes is what was needed by WordPress to log you in, it would automatically log them in as the admin. So give you a little idea, forget having to crack your username and password. With PHP register globals on, it basically gives an individual talented hacker a lot of ability to hack your site simply by just adding known variables to your URL string right in your browser and basically being able to bypass your security. So this is bad.
Yeah, the core WordPress has a lot of that stuff turned off. And they've reprogrammed it not to allow you to do that. But when you're dealing with themes and plugins and other code, you're not always sure that the programmer took that into effect. So it's bad. Turn it off.
So also down here, there's the allow URL include that's currently on that should be off. And it says basically check if the plugins and themes file is enabled. Currently it's enabled. We'll talk about this last. If you didn't do anything else, if you just changed the directives for PHP, display errors, register globals, allow URL include, if you just turn those all off, you would have a much more secure location. Next would be, of course, to also restrict the file permissions for wp-config. So what we're going to do is going to go ahead and do that work. We'll rerun the test, see the change, and then we'll talk just a little bit about the other items that are still showing up here. and then I'll just recheck to make sure with my notes and with Jerry that we've covered basically everything that we want to cover, because mostly it's the process is done. How we change the PHP directives, though, is going to be dependent upon your hosting environment. Some of you will have the facility to change that yourself. We do on this particular server. However, you may or may not. So please note that if you don't have the facility we're about to show you, just make a note of these items. Basically, just take these items. You could just grab the text. Of course, take this, copy it out of here, put it into your site details or whatever running thing, and you could send this to your host. Is it possible for you to turn display errors PHP, to off, etc.? Basically, just take each one of those items as far as the PHP directives are concerned and paste them to a file. Go back to your host. If you don't have the availability to do it yourself, I'll just go ahead and paste them down here so I can make sure that I remember them properly myself.
Most hosts are welcome to, welcome you to ask them to do stuff like this. Also, if you really just don't feel comfortable doing what we're going to show you, you can sometimes ask your host, and they usually will do it for you.
Yeah. Typically, you won't generally run into any problems asking them to turn off register globals. You may or may not run into issues asking about these other two, but the biggest one is the register globals, and I haven't run into any issues that hosts have said no to that.
I'll say that with the one downside of the three, why Kevin gets set up to edit, is the one that says display errors. That will turn off any error reporting on the site, so you might not actually see, true errors. So you might not turn that off if you're working on a site, or if you're doing development or something that's more advanced. You might turn that off after you get the site ready. That's the only downside of any of those three that I would say on why you might not do one of them. You might just delay that one, but typically that's not a problem.
Okay, so if you log into cPanel, you can look around and see, it might be named something differently for you, but inside of this HostGator account, it's under the software and services option. There's a number of different options. One of them is called PHP configuration. The other for us is called php.ini, which is the initialization file for PHP. It's called easy config. Probably most of you will have the PHP configuration option. Unfortunately, this just tells you what your PHP setup is. It doesn't allow you to change anything. So we won't go there, but you understand that is, it says PHP configuration, but it's really just a reporting of what your PHP settings are currently set to. But php.ini.easyconfig, if I click on it, the first thing I have to do is click this button to enable it, and then it's going to show me all of the current values set through PHP, and it's going to give me actually the ability to turn things on and off. So if you have this functionality, as we do on this server that we're showing you, you can effect those changes yourself. Again, just make sure that you are really cautious, that you only make the changes that you want to change, and you don't change anything else. Of course, you could log in and change it back, but just be really cautious that you know what you're doing, and it would be wise to go slow if you haven't done this a few times. So we're looking through those three values. Again, the most important of which is register globals, and you'll see that value is right here. And these are worded exactly as they are inside of Security Ninja. If we look at the thing again, we're looking for display underscore errors, register underscore globals, and allow underscore URL include. All we need to do is turn each of those to off. So the first is register globals. I'm going to tick off. Now we're going to look for the others. So we're looking for allow URL include, which is here. Again, go slow. You can double check it against your text file to make sure that is in fact the right value, and it is. Turn that to off, and we're looking for display errors. And I believe that's farther up. It is. Display errors is here. We'll turn that off as well. And once that's done, go to the very bottom of your file and click Save Changes. And that's as simple as it is to change those values if, of course, you have the php.ini easy config facility inside of your host. Again, if you don't, you will probably need to contact technical support and simply just tell them that you're improving your WordPress security and you would like them to set these 3 PHP directives to off, and then hopefully that they will say yes and facilitate that for you. If we go back now to our site into Security Ninja, what we can do is now run the tests again. It's going to take just a minute again. And we can come down and take a peek. So we still have some things that are showing up as red. Remember that I said that some of these things we disagree with and we're actually not going to change, even though Security Ninja doesn't like it. But if we look at display errors, that's now green. If we look at register globals, that's now green. If we look at allow URL include, that's now green. So of these that are left, again, I said that we disagree with having to move where WordPress is installed. It's not that it's bad, but it can cause more challenges than it's worth, and it's really very easy for someone to figure out where you moved it to anyway. So the improvement in security is minimal. The ability for you to have headaches is large. So our suggestion is to leave this alone. We do want to harden the WP config file before we're all done. And let's talk, actually, we already talked about upgrade.php. This is similar to moving WordPress. The improvement to WordPress security is minimal. The headaches can be large, so we don't do this either. Check if plugins and themes file editor is enabled. What does that mean? Well, if we are inside of our WordPress install as an administrator, if we go under Appearance, you'll see that we have the editor available to us. So Appearance and Editor. This gives us the ability to basically change the coding of our theme. So if I was a hacker and I was capable of getting into the WordPress area as an admin, I could inject malicious code into any one of these files and update it, and it would start to run. So that's one of the reasons why you might consider disabling this. The same thing is true for plugins. The plugins also has an editor, and similarly it gives you the ability to inject code into any one of the plugins. So the downside to doing this, of course, is that it does mean that if you want to make any changes yourself, if you're the administrator and you typically do want to add something or do want to make some type of a change in the themes editor, it's no longer going to be available to you inside of WordPress. You'll have to do that work by either your cPanel's file manager or by downloading the files off your server via FTP, making the change, and then re-uploading them. So this is entirely up to you. However, if you want to do that, we'll go back to Tools, Security Ninja. And one of the things that I really like about Security Ninja is all of these details and tips. There's a lot of information over at Ultimate Security Checker, but you'll find more, and in my opinion, better written information here. So I click Details, Tips, and Help. It'll take us to the specific area, and you can see right here it says to check if plugins and or the themes file editor is enabled. If we want to turn both of those off, we can do it simply by adding a piece of information to the themes functions files, the functions.php file. Please remember that this is theme specific. So if someone changed the theme, they could then access the theme or plugin editor again. So here's basically what I'm trying to tell you is this. If we go back into WordPress. We go to Appearance and Themes, have the ability to switch themes, and if the functions file was updated for 2011 but not 2010, and of course you could update it for both, and then it would keep them out. But if you don't do the work for all of your available plugins, what they can do is come inside if they have administrator access, activate a new theme. Since that code only lives inside of the functions file for one particular theme, the theme editor or the plugin editor would come back, and then they could start doing stuff again. So if you're going to go that route, you might think about potentially adding that code to a plugin that would make that that content global, or by making sure that you update each of the individual functions.php files for any of the themes that you have inside of your admin. Is that what you're going to say, Jerry?
Yeah, I was just going to say it can be added to ones, and you're wondering why Simple Security doesn't have it, is because then it locks you out of everything, and the point was not to lock you out. There's pros, like Kevin went, there's pros and cons to doing it. You could lock yourself out of everything if you do the wrong code. So I usually don't worry about the editor.
Yeah, neither do I, but you at least understand what it is. If you wanted to do it, you can obviously do it through the functions.php file through FTP, or you can go to Appearance and then Editor since it's currently live. You could find, here's the theme that you're working with. You can find the functions.php file just by scanning this list. And here it is under Theme Functions, functions.php. If I click this, it'll activate it in the editor. You could find an appropriate place. This is where I said before, this is the more geeky thing, because you can mess stuff up if you add a function in between something else that needs to run. So be really careful if you are adding new functions to your functions.php file. The functions.php file is very cool. You can do a lot of cool things, very plugin-like via functions.php, but you have to have a little bit of knowledge and skill in order to know what you're doing. For this to work, you can actually, on 2011, you could put it at the very bottom, and actually that's not the code I would want. I have to go back to Security Ninja to get it, but you could add it at the very bottom on this particular functions file and it would work just fine. But just note that each functions.php file is coded uniquely. It's theme dependent. They don't all work the same.
Yeah, and not all themes access functions PHP the same way, so especially some premium themes. So you might have to go a different direction anyways.
Anyway, we're just kind of giving you some information as to what it is and what it talks about so that you're educated, but we're not actually going to advise that you do it. In our opinion, the pro doesn't far outweigh the con. So that's pretty much it for that. Let me go back to Security Ninja and look. I know that we still have not hardened the wp-config file, and I believe that's the only thing out of this group that we're going to do as far as here is concerned. We will talk just a few minutes about other WordPress security issues that are outside of hardening the server, because there's some other things that you can do to actually improve or harden WordPress itself. So we'll do the wp-config file last. But we'll jump into some other things. Some of the other things, they're pretty basic, but some of the things to consider in regards to WordPress is users and also comments. So in terms of users, if I go to users, all users, we'll see that we only have one user here right now. The username is funky. The email is currently fake, which of course you'd want it to be real. And the role says it's an administrator, and I've made one post because, of course, WordPress made the fake post. Let's click on Edit, and you can do this by users your profile too, either way. I'll click on Edit here. We want to do a couple of things. Number one, this is just a personal thing. Let's see, if we look at the site, you'll see this profile or admin bar showing up at the top on the home page. The profile bar is cool, but I don't personally like seeing it on the home page, so that's just a personal preference. It's not a security thing, but I'm going to turn that off. But down here, right now, if the theme uses, or basically is posting post author information, it's going to use the username because that's the only value that I've really given it. You see that the nickname basically is the same as the username, and that's not good. We want to change that. So what you can do is you can input data into the first name last name field, and please note that you don't have to use both, and they don't have to be your first name last name. So let's say you use a nickname, and you don't have to do that either, but maybe you want to just do it something generic like author, or you could do it something nickname-ish like Jimbo or something. And again, it could be first name, last name, or just first name. I'll put in Jimbo Smith just so you can see how it works. Under display name publicly, now that I've entered this information, we're going to get different options. I can now display my name publicly as Jimbo, as Smith, as Jimbo Smith, or as Smith Jimbo. So let's just say I want to choose Jimbo, and I'm going to change my nickname as well. My nickname, I don't want to match this either. My nickname is Jimbo. I can match the display name just fine, but I don't want anything to match basically my actual WordPress username. Once that's done, I can click Update Profile, and my profile has been updated. So when it outputs now my my name publicly, it's going to posted by Jimbo, as opposed to posted by XAZ, KT, etc., which of course, number one, that would look really strange to humans, and in addition to that, it just further exposes the WordPress username inside of the content and makes it easy for someone to now know that they only have to crack the password again, which isn't good. So that's the first thing I would recommend. The second thing I would say is to add no more users than you have to, and to not give anybody else administrator rights unless you absolutely have to. So here's a quick note for anyone who is doing this on behalf of clients. When I work on behalf of clients, I only give my clients a username with an administrator, or with a role rather, of editor. If they complain and they think that I'm doing something weird by only giving them editor rights and not administrator rights, as if I'm trying to control them, I simply explain to them the security problems behind them having an administrator account. And if they basically demand an administrator account, of course they're the client, I will give them one, but I also give them one with the caveat that basically they understand that if their account is hacked, and or if they are in effect basically the cause of problems, that obviously all of that is going to be on them. No longer will it be on me. And typically that causes them to stop and say, oh, okay, I guess I get it. I don't really have to have an administrator role. Maybe just an editor account is perfectly fine. With an administrator level account, they can still do most everything. They can't change themes. They can't add or remove plugins. It's mostly the tech stuff they can't do. They can still approve, comments made by anybody at their level or underneath them, whether that be author or contributor, etc. They can pretty much do all of the regular, content management. They can, upload media, but they just can't manage the tech side of things. And most of my clients, although not all, have been totally okay with that. So that's just something to point out. There are multiple user roles, starting with administrator. If you want to add a new user, you simply click this button to do that. Add the information. Please remember again that it doesn't matter. I would say to you that you should be creating the accounts if at all possible. If your client or someone else is going to create accounts, please teach them the importance of strong, unguessable usernames and passwords. You still don't want a hacker to get in even at editor level. It's still too much access, or at any level for that matter. So unless you train them and teach them the hows and whys, they're going to want to use something like admin or Joe. That's just because that's human nature. They want something easy. So when you go to create this, you have the ability to create a role. The lowest level is that of subscriber. The highest level is that of administrator. And if you start from administrator, it works its way down. So administrator, next is editor. They have most opportunities except for can't change themes, plugins, etc. Most of the code stuff. An author can write and approve their own content, but they can't edit or mess with anybody else's content. A contributor can write content, but they can't even publish their own content. It has to be basically approved by an editor. So depending upon your needs, that's just a quick rundown of some of the basic user roles. In terms of comments, we'll go over to settings, and then I think it's in discussion. Here's some things to consider. If you're running a more traditional website with WordPress, even if it does include, some dynamic content like that typically found on a blog, if you, don't absolutely require comments, it's safest to simply turn it off. So simply tick this box that says allow people to post comments, and it removes that functionality going forward. If there's already comments made on your site, those will all stay. It just will remove the comment box from any new post content. As it says underneath, the settings can be overridden for individual articles. So you can actually turn it back on for an individual page or post if you really wanted to in the main editor. But globally, unless you override it, all comments go off if you untick this. And that's my suggestion to you, unless you really need comments. If you do, of course, then turn it on. The other thing, security related, basically is some of these other things. Let's see where I'm at. You can turn off basically blog notifications, basically pingbacks and trackbacks. These are pieces of tech that basically allow spam. So, if you really want to be more secure, all three of those off is going to basically help you. The first one is basically you sending trackbacks and pingbacks. The other is others sending pingbacks and trackbacks. And then again, the third value is commenting. Down here, let's see, where am I looking at? My brain isn't finding it. It may be on another page and I'm not looking for it at the right place. If you do have comments turned on, the comment author must fill out their name and email if you have this on. So if you're going to leave comments on, please make sure that you keep that ticked. You don't want anonymous comments to be allowed. That's just going to open you up for spam. Down here, it says users must be registered and logged in to comment. This only works if you're allowing users to register to your site, and we would not recommend that you do that unless you have a specific need. Again, this is going to allow a whole bunch of people to create WordPress user accounts on your site, and it just becomes a nightmare to manage, and it just opens up your site for additional security issues. So I would recommend that you not let users register unless you absolutely have to. You can be emailed when anyone posts a comment or a comment is held in moderation. Down here, if you do have comments turned on, the most stringent is to tick this box that says the administrator must always approve a comment. So every new comment that's made, the administrator will get an email and be notified that a new comment was made, and they would have to actually come and log in and approve a comment before it would actually go live. So that is the most secure route to ensure that comment spam stays off your site, but at the same time, of course, it's going to cause you the most work. The default setting is that the comment author must have a previously approved comment. By that basically meaning you had to approve it or moderate it the first time. The second time the same person posts a comment on your site, it automatically goes live. You do have the ability to control when a comment goes into moderation or becomes blacklisted down here. If you set this to 1, then anytime anyone leaves a live link in their their comment, it automatically gets put into moderation, so you'd have to approve it. Of course, this is typically one of the things that spammers want to do is leave links. So it's set to 2 by default, which basically means that they could leave 1 link, but they couldn't leave 2. If they left 2, it would go into moderation, so that's just something to think about. And then underneath here is the ability to leave a list of content. And the content can be basically a name, a URL, an email, an IP address, etc., 1 per line, basically. So if you wanted to leave a name, you leave the name Viagra. Anytime someone posted a comment that included Viagra, it would put it into comment moderation, and you can do the same thing for any amount of content that you want. Again, 1 per line. In the bottom, you can do the same exact thing. You could actually just copy the same list and paste it below. But this time, instead of simply just putting it into moderation, it automatically marks the comment as spam, which basically all that does is it works in conjunction with the Akismet plugin to notify the Akismet resource that a particular comment's been marked as spam, and it allows the Akismet plugin to get smarter over time. Basically, if it can find trends or it finds a lot of users are reporting that the same particular comment author is being marked as spam, they're probably a spammer, and they get added to a particular list. And then when their comments come in, if you're running the Akismet plugin, it gets tripped up basically by that piece of tech. There is one thing though, and I haven't found it. Where, Jerry, is the section allowing anybody to register?
Hit General.
Yeah.
And it's right towards the middle of their membership. Anyone can register right after those boxes.
Thank you. So on General Settings for membership, you can see that there's a box, and it's thankfully off by default. Under membership, if I tick this, anybody can register. And if anybody can register, thankfully it's also set to the least powerful role, subscriber. But if you mess this up and you put anyone can register as an administrator, anybody could come by and create a WordPress account at administrator role and then basically just take control over your site. So you want to be really careful with this. Our suggestion is that you don't allow anyone to register, period. But if you do, be really, really cautious in regards to what role that you allow them. Lastly, since we're on this page, I'll mention just one thing, and then we'll harden the WP config file, show you how that changes things a little bit for Security Ninja, and we're going to show you a little quick rescan at Security. And I think I'm done, and we can basically just take some questions. Security Ninja mentioned, and so did Ultimate Security Checker, or at least one of those two did, that you can, or it recommended that you moved your WordPress installation to some other place. You'll see here that there are 2 URLs. There's the WordPress address URL and the site address URL. The site address URL is basically the URL that your visitors will find your site under. So, of course, this is just our domain .extension. However, if I wanted to, I could move my WordPress files somewhere else other than the main root directory. So here's an example. I could put /secret, and what that means is what I would have to do in order to affect this, and I'm not going to go through the full process, but I'm going to show you exactly what it means. We're here in our root directory currently, and if I refresh and cancel and refresh again to make sure we're really logged in, and we are now, we're in our root directory for our account, and right now all of our WordPress files are sitting inside of the root directory. Well, what I could do is in FileZilla, I can right-click, choose Create Directory. I could name it Secret. Click OK. We would see a new directory named Secret. Of course, it's empty right now. I could drag into it all of these files minus the index page and the WP config page, and it would move basically WordPress over to the secret directory. And in order for that to work, you have to do both parts. You have to create the directory name and you have to add it to the WordPress address URL. Again, this is not something that Jerry and I recommend because, quite honestly, it will cause you more headache than good, and it really won't improve your WordPress security all that much because, like I said, it's really easy to find the path to WordPress. So just wanted you to know what that is. Lastly, we'll go into the server. We'll find the wp-config file. Again, if you're using SFTP, just ensure that you are in fact connected before you make the change. You can see if I right-click and choose File Permissions, I'll pause on that for just a second. I just right-click wp-config and choose File Permissions. You can see the value is currently set to the value that was reported to us inside of Security Ninja 666. My recommendation to you is that you firstly try 400. And you can see what that does is it basically turns off everything except for the read permission for the owner. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to see if it took. You see that now there's just an R left, and if I right-click and choose File Permissions again, you can see that it has in fact stayed at 400. So what this has done is it's removed the ability for the public to mess with that file whatsoever, and again, your WP config file is extremely important to your installation of WordPress. We go back to Security Ninja. Let's see, we're already here. Go back to tests and run tests again. We're going to see that no longer is it unhappy with the permission settings for WP config. It now knows, it says it has the right permission set, so it's happy with that value. The one thing that I will tell you is not all servers are going to allow you to set your WP config file to 400. So if it does not, my suggestion to you is to try 440. So instead of 400, that you try 440. See, that just simply gives the owner and the group permissions to read the file, and try that and see if that works. If that doesn't, you might try something less. Anything less than 666 is good. So 655 would be better. 644 would even be better than that. But seriously, this is an important thing, and I would want basically nothing more than 644 if at all possible, and realistically 400 or 440 is really where you want it set. You see that even this gives the public the ability to read that file. It just doesn't give them the ability to write or execute it. So just be really careful when setting it. 400 or 440 is best, and 400 is really best if your server will allow you to do it. Now, real quickly before Jerry's going to bring up an issue probably with Backup Buddy and that setting here, I'm guessing, since he and I are on the same page with this. But before I let him do that, I'm going to show you something else. We're going to go back to Security, and we're going to go back to the home, and we're going to scan the site again. Live training URL number 2.info. Hopefully I've spelled that right. I think I have. Our site's still good. Everything's still fine here under website details. Unfortunately, oh, I'm surprised. I wonder if this is being cached. That should not have happened. Let me see something here real quick. Unless they've changed their settings, typically the PHP directive changes that we've made will stop the cPanel username from being exposed. And if that doesn't happen, then it's possible that securities check has been changed and it's still finding it. So
they might be caching on scan.
yeah, can you quickly run it on your site and see what you get?
Okay.
In the past, our tests have shown that it stops the cPanel username from being revealed, but unfortunately we don't control security site, so I do want to check though to make sure.
No, I'm seeing the same thing that you're
That I'm showing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that they might be caching the site itself.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll have to.
If you look down below the rescan button, read what it says.
These scan results may be cached. Okay. So that may be the case because all of our previous tests have shown that basically it stops.
I just redid it. And it went away.
Oh, okay.
Hit the rescan button.
Okay.
So security is a very popular site, so they don't want to necessarily be, doing denial of services on, somebody constantly is trying to hit a site, so they do cache their information often.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, you can see that now no longer is it revealing the path to our cPanel username, which is really what we were after in one of those PHP directive settings is what was causing that to happen. Revealing the cPanel username is obviously not a good thing because, again, most people are concerned with someone being able to hack and get into their WordPress login, but if someone can hack and get into your cPanel, it really doesn't matter at that point. They can do anything that they want from that point all the way down. So removing the cPanel username is an important step, and I'm glad that Jerry helped me understand the rescan part of that to make sure that it works. So I think that's it, other than the discussion of
you got a couple of things.
wp-config. Okay, good. So wp-config and the Backup Buddy plugin. Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay. wp-config we just hardened. We just set it so that the permissions are made so it can only be read by by the group or by the owner, the server itself. The problem is when you back up with Backup Buddy or you back up in cPanel or anything, it brings the permissions along with everything, and then when you go to restore, it can't write that file properly because it doesn't have write permissions. Also, when you're doing changes or editing, you can't edit that file because you don't have write permissions. So right before if you're going to make a backup, you need to deal with if it fails when you're restoring, or if it fails when you're doing some sort of updates or things like that, you need to know that you'll probably have to go in there and create the wp-config file either by copy-paste and create a new one, or you need to change the permissions to like 666 or 644 or something like that, higher permissions so that it can be read and write during the backup. It's not a bad thing having, when that happens. It's just something to be aware of. The main problem that comes up with Backup Buddy is when you do a restore, you can change settings in the config file on the restore, and if you try to change settings and the permissions are set, the settings do not get changed, so you end up with all the old settings. So that's the downside of hardening your config file, is if it needs to be written or updated or something like that, you might have to change it. Normally when it's actually running and just doing normal backups and stuff, it's not a problem.
Okay, cool. I just came across in my notes one thing that I didn't show. So what else were you going to say?
cPanel passwords, salts.
Yep. So
talk about plugins, and that was it.
Okay, so cPanel passwords, did you want to say anything more than just to make sure that they were extremely strong and
No,
reset
I
them
wanted,
if they're not?
what we didn't go through what happens if you got hacked and somebody changed your admin.
Okay, as far as WordPress, as far as you talking about WordPress.
Yeah, it was actually MySQL showing how to change your admin
Okay,
password.
good. Thank you for reminding me. So we're going to show you a couple of cool things that probably you haven't seen before. At least in our previous trainings, most have said that, hey, that's cool, we didn't see it. In terms of not the cPanel password, but the ability to change your WordPress user account password inside of cPanel. In addition to that, we did not cover WordPress salts or keys, and that was what I just looked at in my notes. And was there a third thing that you just said?
Well, how to if you have a site that has an admin user, how do you change it to a new username?
Okay. Oh, and we wanted to talk about plugins and what happens if things go funky and you get logged out.
Right, and why you don't leave plugins and themes lying around.
Okay, so I'll do most of those. I'll let Jerry talk about the plugins and themes, and we'll wrap this up pretty quickly. That won't take very long. So once the first thing to do is, again, if you've scanned your system and you've made sure that you're not running any more viruses and or malware, the next thing I would do is to make sure that you change your passwords, because it's possible that your current passwords have been compromised. So you can do that, and that actually does involve cPanel passwords. So we'll talk about that too, in addition to what Jerry just brought up. The first thing that you need to do is to log into your site. Let's see, this is here. You need to log into your site via cPanel, and again, I would recommend HTTPS for this. Once you're logged in, you have the ability to change your cPanel password. It might be in a different place for you, but in HostGator, it's under Preferences, Change Password. You have the ability to put your old password in and then your new password twice and then change it. This is for cPanel. Just kind of ignore, you want to leave this ticked, but it says allow MySQL password change. It doesn't actually change your MySQL password, it just allows it. And then you click change password now. Just of course make sure that you are using a strong password, something that's 100 out of 100. So that's something that I obviously will do as soon as this training is done, since I have just exposed my cPanel password for this account. So that's one thing. In addition to doing that, and that's the cPanel part of it, if we go back to the home page, what Jerry was talking about is actually the ability to retrieve and or, maybe not retrieve isn't the right word, but to change your actual WordPress user account information. If your hosting account gives you the wp-admin functionality, this is what we're going to show you how to do. Probably most of you have this functionality inside of your account. What it is it's kind of a user-friendly way to access your databases. That's the best way I can explain it. So I'm going to click wp-admin. You see that it's going to redirect. It looks totally different than cPanel. On the left-hand side, you will get a listing of any of the live and active databases on your site. So if you have multiple databases going on, you'll see a listing of them. In this case, I have only one. So this is where it's really important to slow down and make sure that you're working with the right one. One of the reasons why I had you store that information in a file. So I can go and look, what is the database name for this particular installation? It's in my folder, and it agrees with this. Okay, I'm in the right one. If you have multiples, this is going to be extremely beneficial to you. So you click on the actual database you want to activate or work with, and you'll see that we get some information over here. There are 11 tables that make up WordPress, 11 database tables. You can see that they're named comment, meta, comments, links, options, post meta, etc. You can also see that they're preceded by a random bit of text and a underscore. This, if you recall, was our table prefix. this would have been WP underscore had we left it at the default, and that's the change that was made there. Now that we basically know that there's 11 tables and we kind of understand what's going on, we're in the right database, the one that we're looking for is users, and it's right here. So I'm going to click the box here, and we're going to basically mess with or edit this particular thing. I'm just going to click on the text itself, and this comes up. If you click on the edit link here, we'll have the ability to edit now this particular table of the database. We're not editing the entire database, just simply the WP users, or the, in this case, this funky table name users, the users table for WordPress. And I'll click edit. When this comes up, you'll see a number of values. This is the user login. Again, if we look at our site titles, we know that that equates to this value here. That's our WordPress login name. There's our user password. Of course, that looks a little bit different. It's actually encrypted, so we can't see it. There's the user, what they say is nice name or nickname. There's the user email address. There's when the user was registered, etc. The only fields that you should ever consider changing through wp-admin for your users is either A, the password, or B, the email address. The other values you should leave alone and only change those from inside of WordPress admin. Yeah, Jerry.
And for other users besides the admin, you can change all these inside of WordPress also. So this is not the way. If a user needs a password change, you can change it inside of WordPress, or if he needs his email change. This is if you can't get into your admin account, you would go in here to make these changes.
Right. Or in the case that you basically have a client that you've given admin account or administrator account or role setting to, and you have to do some change for them. So if you need to change your email address, you can simply just click in this box and update it. It's just raw. Password functionality, though, is not like that. So this is actually encrypted through something called MD5, and what I can do is I can just highlight the entire thing and get rid of it, and I can type in just, you know, a new password, but this won't work by itself. It needs to be encrypted in the database in order for WordPress to use it. So how that works is you click the drop-down box, find MD5 from the list, and then you click Go. And it says that one row is affected. If we go back and look at it again, we'll now see that the user password is this long, crazy string. All right, it's encrypted it again using the MD5 feature. So we've changed the password for this particular login. If we go back to our account now, refresh, we got logged out because our password was no longer accurate, and WordPress checked it. And so now basically I need to log back in with the funky string. And the password that you have all just seen. And now we're right back into WordPress. So if you ever need to reset your administrator account, you can do that through wp-admin exactly as we've just shown you. So let's see, we've covered cPanel passwords, we've covered username, emails. Okay, so changing your admin account. So let's say for some reason you want to change your admin account altogether, and the reason that you might want to do that is this. You go to users, your profile. If you used Fantastico, or whoever used Fantastico initially to create the admin account, it's going to set the nickname as admin. It's going to be set inside of the WordPress tables that way, and you don't want it set that way. You want to delete the default admin account. So what you can do, as long as you have administrator account roles, you can create new users. But here's what you need to know. You can't create two users with the same email address. So let's say, for instance, this particular user account you no longer wanted to use. You wanted to dump it. It was a security risk, or it was, you know, it was created for an employee that left the company, and you no longer need it, but someone else needs it. Rather than, giving them the same user details, that would not be secure. The old disgruntled employee might still, log in and mess with stuff. So rather than, give the same user and password information to the new employee, you'd want to delete it and create a new. But if somehow, this probably wouldn't work in that scenario, but if it was for you and you had the same, you want to use the same email address for the real site, it won't allow you to do it. So here's basically the simple trick. You simply just fake it. You change the email address to something else temporarily. So now we're going to basically just change the email address to fake new. I'm going to click Update Profile. And now that has been changed. Now that it's been changed, what I can do is I can log out, can log back in, with the same username and password that we have active for our admin account. We can go back to users, add, oops, I want to go to add new rather than that. Users, add new, sorry. We can create a new username, email address. We can use the original now, that we had used, and all of the information, use a strong password, etc. Assign ourselves back as a role with administrator. Even send us the password via email if we really wanted to. Click Add New User, and it would add us with that now real email address. Then we would log out, log back in with the other old account, and the other information. I'm getting myself confused, aren't I?
Okay, yeah. So why don't you make a new user? Why don't we actually do it? So if you had an account that was called admin, let's say the other account was admin. So we make a new user with a strong username, not new user, we're just doing it for the demo. You now make the new user with a strong username, your email address, you set the first and last name, all the things we've talked about doing for a user. Once you've got this all set up, you will log out of the current admin account that we're in, and we log out of the current admin account that we're in. We would log in now with the new user. With this new user is an admin also, so they have the ability to delete users and such. So we now have the two users, but we're still logged in as Exaz et for Dev. That's how you pronounce it. So why not change it in PHP-MyAdmin? Because there's other things inside of WordPress that are keeping track of certain parts of the username, and you're not sure if they're going to change or not unless you use this process. That's why we don't touch usernames in PHP-MyAdmin. So you log in as the new user strong. Did you forget your password?
Uh-huh.
I thought you were new user strong.
Oh, okay. I'm tired.
I know. We're almost done. And then, so what you do is you log in as the new user with, of course, the strong password. And now you can go to users and show all users, and you can now go in and actually delete the other one. You can now see the delete button is there. You can't delete yourself. But this is the key part right here. You have posts and information assigned to the old user, Exaz, and you go in and you now assign them to the new user. You click confirm deletion. It will now get rid of that old user and anything associated with it and assign everything now to your new user. Some people have had good luck just changing it in the database, but I've had issues, and especially when you start dealing with plugins and stuff, this is the cleanest way to get away from an admin type or a bad username to a more strong username. That's all there is to it. And it takes a lot shorter than what we just went through. So I recommend using this as opposed to trying to find all the places that plugins and themes and other things might have stored the other username. So,
Okay.
okay.
Was there anything else? Are we good?
Let's see. We changed the password. We changed.
Salts. Okay. So inside of our WordPress package is a file that we've talked a lot about today, WordPress or wp-config.php. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to download it from the server, because again, remember that this file now is it's customized. It's changed. Actually, in our original package, let's see, where am I inside of? I'm not inside of the right place. In the WordPress package initially, we had the wp-config sample file. We never had a wp-config file here to begin with. So what I'm going to do is I have the right area open for WordPress on my machine on the left-hand side. I'm going to activate wp-config.php, right-click, choose Download, and you'll see it's going to push it over here on my machine. Once it's here, we can open that file. Let's see, we are here inside of WordPress. We now have the config file. This one's the one that we just downloaded. I'm going to right-click and open with Edit Plus, which is my preferred text editor. And this is the thing that we haven't done yet to this point. We haven't really gotten into the WP config file because we did all of this work through the online guided facility. We wrote the data for the database name, the database user, the database password, local host, etc. But we didn't actually have to mess with it here in the code view. However, there is one thing that you should at least know about and look at, and that's this information right here, what's referred to as unique keys and salts. This whole thing is quite geeky, but what you basically need to know is it's kind of contained in this information at the top. It's a series of unique phrases that basically just harden your installation and makes it even harder for someone to basically hack. It also has the ability to, if you change these, and you can change these as often as you'd like, as long as you understand that anytime you change these, it will automatically cancel any session cookie that's existing. So if you have people that are logged into your site, if that's something that you do, it's going to immediately log them out and force them to log back in. Just understand that. But where you get these from is basically this URL right here, and it is inside of WP config. You'll see that it is a HTTPS URL. If you copy it from here, go back to your browser, paste it in and hit enter, it's going to access WordPress, and it's going to display random keys and salts for your use. If you click, you just pay attention here, see it says JP?D. If I hit refresh, you'll see that value has changed, and it will change every time someone hits this page. It will be random and unique. So what you can do is simply copy the entire content, each and every line, making sure to get every single thing all the way down to these closing semicolons. Go back to your text editor, whatever that happens to be, even if that's Notepad. Simply delete these, Control V to paste, and you have just updated your individual installation with completely unique what's called unique keys and salts. Again, just understanding that this just hardens your WordPress installation and makes it just a little bit more secure.
Don't forget you have to save and possibly upload.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I saved. So yeah, you obviously have to save your work, and it doesn't affect anything until, of course, you actually upload it back to your server. So we've downloaded it. Now we just need to go backwards. So again, we already have the server open. I'm going to refresh, cancel, refresh again, make sure that I see success. And now that I have success, I'm going to find that file again, making sure, of course, if you have multiple, installations of WordPress, making sure that you are using the correct WP config file to push back. That's extremely important. I'm going to right-click, choose Upload. It's going to give me a dialog box that says, you sure? Do you want to overwrite this file because it already exists? I'm going to say yes. It's going to overwrite that file. Let's see, if I bring this, oh, it's already there. If I bring this out, you'll see that FileZilla is giving me a list of times modified. Just pay attention to that. Look at the date and time that the file was modified and make sure that it did in fact take before you determine that you're done with that process. And then, of course, recheck your site and make sure that everything is good.
And if you're hardening your, because we're hardening the site, you want to go back and then once you're sure that it's working, set the permissions level back to something that's more secure.
Good man. So back and change file permissions back to whatever worked for your individual setting or your server setting.
And basically these are kind of like signatures that are used to make your site be unique. So the cookies and everything like stuff that is going on behind the scenes is unique and to your site, because nobody else has those exact same set of salts. So that's what it's for. That said, do you have to do this? No. It's just something, it does reset the login cookies and things like that. If you think there's a compromise, or let's say you got rid of some users, or maybe you were hacked, I believe security, when they go in and remove malware from your site, they reset the salts, stuff like that. And then you're wondering, well, where did they come from? Initially, when we did the install, the WordPress install went out to that page and grabbed the salts and inserted them in there automatically. Because otherwise, by default, can you show a WP config sample? By default, it just has a phrase in there saying, hey, change these. So so basically what happens is WP install puts the unique information there, the salts from that spot. So the problem is that some of the automated scripts just leave that there or put in the same salts for all their installs. So it's not as secure. And that's why we recommend doing the manual install. It doesn't take that long and it's much more secure. That's what salts are.
All right.
Plugins, is that where we're at?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So plugins are probably the most popular thing next to themes. Actually, I think they're more popular than themes on what people do to their site. They add all sorts of plugins to give, Google Analytics, to make the site more secure, like our simple security plugin, and different things. Add more functionality to it. The problem is that all of these plugins are actually code that's sitting on your server, and in some cases running. Now, in the case of Security Ninja and Ultimate Security Checker, they don't run all the time until you actually open them up. So you're saying, well, they can just stay there. They don't affect performance. These ones are not that bad, but the problem is if they are have active code in it, the code is still on the server. So for the Security Checker ones, I recommend removing them when you're done with them, because you can always reinstall them. For the Ultimate Security Checker and Security Ninja. For ones like Backup Buddy, you only need it when you're running a backup, but the advantage is you can schedule a backup if it's installed. But let's say that you had you installed one that did some nice white box effects, put photos up all really nice and neat, and used a third-party resizer called like Tim Thumb, and it's all beautiful and all that, and you go, I really don't like that, and you disable it. So click if you click deactivate on this, all it does is make it so that WordPress doesn't run it, but all of the code is still sitting on the server. So if somebody knows that they can maliciously go in and there's some sort of exploit on it, they can actually run that code or exploit that code, and it's just like it was actually running. So in the case of I guess was it last year or the year before? I guess it was last year. Was the big Tim Thumb one? There was a thumbnail resizer, and it had nothing to do with WordPress directly. It's just that a lot of people used it in their plugins and themes. Well, even if you disabled it, it still sat on the server. So the guys that were hackers knew how to exploit the old version, because it wasn't updated and things like that, and they got into the sites, and that's how a lot of malware happened last year, how a lot of sites got hacked. And it wasn't just WordPress, it was anybody that had this little plugin. They've since updated the plugin, and it's gotten patched and stuff, so you kind of need to keep up on the latest version. But if you don't use it, like Hello Dolly, once you've determined that everything is working in plugins, you can get rid of it. If you've tried a plugin and you're not quite sure about it, get rid of it. You can always reinstall it. Especially with themes. Themes are the other thing that gets exploited a lot. If you have a bad theme, even if it's not installed or active, it's still got the code there, and it can be executed by the hackers. And they can go about. There's different ways of finding out what themes might be on there. They can just search for common URLs and stuff. So delete any unused plugins. Use just install the ones that you need to use. And just deactivating them doesn't make them actually inactive on the site. They can still be used as a vector to hack. So that's one thing. The other problem that happens is sometimes something will go wrong on your site, and you come up with that beautiful white screen where you can't log in. And your immediate thing, looks just like that. And the immediate thing is like, oh no, my site's been hacked. It might have only just been a plugin crash. That's usually what the case is, and you can't get anywhere. So people want to know, well, I can't get into WordPress to deactivate the plugins, so how do I deactivate plugins? And there's a cool, simple trick. You go into your WP content folder, and inside of that folder is where your themes and plugins are. So what you want to do to deactivate all the plugins, which is what's recommended on a white screen, is you rename the plugins directory to something else, like rename it to plugins X or something. And this immediately will deactivate all the plugins in WordPress. Can we go back to the WordPress plugins page? So right now you see them all activated, but we actually changed it behind the scenes. We reload the page, and WordPress goes, I have no idea where the plugins went. So being nice, it deactivates all of them. And you see they're all gone. So they're all deactivated, but they're still there. So if you get the white screen, you can now log in. You see they're deactivated. I would, at that point, log back out normally. Then go back to your plugins directory in your FTP program or file transfer client and rename it back to plugin. I'm sorry, rename it back to plugins. So it's back to normal. Hit enter. Go back to this WordPress. And I think if you reload it might work. It might not work. Might have to log out. Okay, everybody's there, but they're all deactivated. So immediately you've deactivated it, and you can probably log back into your site because you probably had a rogue plugin. And then one by one, add the plugins back and test the site until you narrow down either which plugin itself has got a problem or if there's a conflict between multiple plugins. And that's, somebody put it's kind of like starting up in safe mode. You reset everything. You can do a similar thing with themes. If you installed it and activated the theme and it crashed your site, go in and rename that theme directory by going into WP content and the theme. And you can you don't want to rename the themes directory. Now, you don't want to do that because that'll totally lock you out of WordPress. You have to have a theme active. So what you can do here is go into themes and then rename the rogue theme, the last theme that you had installed. By default, WordPress will try to load up 2011 and then 2010 if it can't find a theme. So if you if you had a rogue theme you installed, just go in and rename it. When you go back in, it says it can't find it, and it shoves it over to like 2010.
Provided, of course, that theme is inside of your themes directory.
Right. So if you don't have 2010 or 2011 in the latest WordPress install or the WordPress install zip file for your version, you can go into this same area and then just drag the theme over into from the theme into your site and activate 2010 or 2011. So that's the way in case your theme broke your site. In any case, don't leave extra themes lying around. Like if you're certain that you got your site working, you don't need multiple themes. You're fine with your one theme. And 2010 and 2011 are no less secure than newer ones. It's just you just have to make sure that you do have the latest version if they found updates. So you should be updating check for updates in your theme and and in your plugins through WordPress. It has an automated process to do most of those. I think that's it for plugins.
Yeah, I keep finding new things. I'm seeing something else here, and it's really simple. And your installation may already have it, but you'll notice that there's an index.php file sitting in here inside of WP content. If I open up plugins, I'm trying to. It's not happy with me, so we'll refresh. If you open up the plugins directory, you'll see that there's an index.php file sitting in here as well. If I open up themes, the same. If I open up upgrade, there should be the same, but there's not. So check your directories inside of WP content and see that there is an index.php file sitting inside of each of these. What basically that does is it protects from what's called directory browsing. So here's a little idea or an explanation in regards to what this means. So right now, as it stands, let's just put the new tab up. If I go to the URL, and I put in wp-content/plugins. So I'm trying to get inside of the WP content directory, and inside of that the plugins directory, and I hit enter. It's going to return us basically a blank screen. That's because there's a blank index.php file sitting inside of it. If I do the same thing though with updates or upgrades, upgrade singular. If I do upgrade, if I can type, you're going to see that it actually gives us the content. If there was content inside of it, it would actually expose it. Now this may be automatically written by WordPress as soon as we do an actual upgrade. That may be something that's actually doing it, but temporarily speaking, it's actually allowing us to browse that directory. So that index.php file, it's really just a blank file, is basically being used to protect the ability to browse directories on our server. So what you can do, if we just simply go back to upgrade, and you can look at uploads as well. Uploads also does not have one, and I would add one there as well. So plugins and themes does have one, as does the entire WP content directory, but upgrade and uploads do not. So temporarily, at least, what I would do is I would open up WP content. I would go just take a look at this index file. This index file sitting in WP content is just a blank index file. So if I open up upgrade and I simply right-click on the index file and choose to upload, it'll upload that file there. And if I go back and do the same thing to uploads, and I guess let's do uploads first so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Right now, as it stands, if I go to uploads, it's actually going to show me a bunch of stuff that we shouldn't be showing. Backup Buddy backups, Backup Buddy temp. This is not good. We don't want anybody to have access to that kind of stuff. So going back to the server, lastly, we're going to upload that index.php file, that blank file that we got from wp-content. And with that done, refreshing will make that go away. So that's another little thing that I just kind of thought about as we were browsing the server again via FTP. It's just important that you stop that.
Can you show them what it actually says inside of there? I thought it was pretty funny. I was wondering why it was 30 bytes, because I always put up 0-byte ones. So they actually have content inside.
Oh, they have content inside the index.php file?
Yeah, just open it up and you'll see it.
Yeah, WordPress, they do some funny stuff. They're silly. So I haven't actually opened it up. So it has a little bit of PHP.
And it says, as a comment, silence is golden.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point. Don't give away all your secrets. Try to minimize, not showing your cards to everybody that comes by. And that was the whole A point of a lot of the things that we did today was to minimize the things that are easily guessed, to giving away your usernames, just different things that open you up to a lot more possible vulnerabilities, and just tightening up your WordPress. And as you notice, we didn't talk about just WordPress security issues, but there's issues with PHP, with your server setup and everything else, and it's kind of the whole package together that you have to look at.
Absolutely. And the final thing that Jerry and I would like to basically pass along to you, if we haven't passed anything else, is to what, Jerry?
Backup.
Backup. Yeah. So everything that you've done to this point has given you a much more hardened installation of WordPress, and a hardened installation even of your server, a hardening of your passwords, and we've taught you how to, at least told you about the need to make sure that your machine is clean before you access your site, and of course try to always access via secure connections if you can. All of that stuff is just best practice information, but realistically, once all that's done, your biggest friend, it kind of seems weird that you would talk about it as far as security is concerned, because backing up, obviously the process of backing up doesn't make your site more secure. It just means that if something should go awry, the ability for you to restore to a point is going to be much easier and faster, and the fact that you have good, strong backups, especially if you're using full backups through whatever facility you're using, you won't lose all of the hard work that you've been after.